So hello guys, how are you all? I hope you all are fine. So today we are gonna see What If a Son of Pain, Episode 1. Do 100 likes for Part 2. Now let's move on to the video. The entire Akatsuki sat, lined up on the couch in their hideout. They all shared similar looks of skepticism. Hell, even Itachi didn't seem to think this was a good idea. After all, they were a group of S-class criminals. How could she possibly think this was a good idea? Toby, of course, was the first to speak, excited. Toby loves children. Children love Toby too. Wouldn't all the, murder be a bad influence on the kid? Not to mention it would be easy enough for them to leak information of the Akatsuki by accident. Kids aren't too good about being quiet when it comes to this sort of thing. Sasori noted, looking up to their leaders. Itachi nodded slightly, not liking the idea of bringing children up in such an environment. Yes, we'll all do respect pain. This could do serious damage to a child's mind. Plus children are much easier to manipulate than one of us. I would not put the 7 nations above torturing children for information. His shark partner nodded, rolling his neck tiredly. Yeah, I wouldn't put it above us not to hurt the kid either. Not all of the members have as good of restraint as Itachi. Our tempers can be wild, he pointed out. Not to mention it would be easy enough for one of us to accidentally scar them as it is. Then if we didn't hurt them, the giant shark or mutated hands might scar them enough for them to go into panic themselves. Hearing the mutated point, Tadara glared heavily at Kisum. My hands aren't mutated. They're amazing, and I bet a kid would be able to see that. I'm all for the kid thing because for once I have to agree with Toby. Kids love me. He smirked. Kakuzu growled lightly, leaning back on the couch. You only say that because you are a child, Tadar. And like you, most children are noisy, messy, and above all else, expensive. This would cut into not only our time for Akatsuki-based missions, but also our time for our free time where we earn most of our own cash. Frowning heavily, Tadara glared at the man, about to say something when Haiden grinned. The kid won't be scared of death once they learn of my god's greatness. They can become worshippers of Jashin with me. They'd love it. He grinned. The other's sweat dropped, and the look on Conan's face told him he wouldn't be working on the kid's conversion under their watch. Haiden pouted, slumping back in his chair. Fine, but if the brat gets into it on its own, then I won't be at fault. Zetsu said nothing for a moment before agreeing. Perhaps it would be good to have a child around. If half the Akatsuki agrees at first glance, it can't do any harm. Going along with his carefree side as he spoke. After all, he figured if worse came to worse, they were all extremely powerful ninja. Why wouldn't they be able to help the kid if it got into trouble with the other nations? Conan smiled thinly to Pain. See, only 4 against it. Addison, and that makes 6 for it. So I guess that settles that. Glancing over at the 4 disagreeing members and offering a warning smile, and if they don't like it, they're free to leave. Itachi shook his head, agreeing with them easily. After all, he had a mission to think of. He hadn't been there long, and he knew Danzo would have his head if he returned so soon as a failure. Kakuzu slowly agreed, not ready to let go of the good money he made as a member of the Akatsuki. Sasori sighed in annoyance but agreed. He didn't want to be kicked out as it would really be more trouble than it was worth. The Akatsuki gave him food and a roof over his head, so why worry about the fate of a kid? That, and he had to admit he knew the pain of losing your parents wasn't easy. Kisum nodded slowly, figuring at least it would be interesting this way. Pain nodded in confirmation. Alright. So this means we need to find a kid now. Conan and I have found the perfect match, and everyone besides Itachi will most likely be fine with this. Itachi, you'll get past it eventually. Hopefully, you'll be reasonable about this. He glanced at the Ravenet for a moment before turning to the others. Sasuke Uchiha. He wouldn't be affected by the killing as much due to him seeing his entire family dead. He can keep things quiet as he is an Uchiha, and Uchiha are known to be about how Itachi is. Itachi is the prime example of everything an Uchiha is. Intelligent, quiet, brave, strong, and mature from a young age. He explained. He is Itachi's younger brother, the only living Uchiha besides Itachi that we know of. Not mentioning Toby for obvious reasons. Tadara gave a loud whine. No, not another Uchiha. If the kid is anything like his brother, he'll just be a snot-nosed, arrogant bastard. He objected, Itachi reaching over on reflex to knock Tadara over the head lightly. The teen glared at the other. Well, it's true. He pointed out. Rolling his eyes lightly, Itachi corrected. Arrogance is not a trait of the Uchiha, it's a trait of the foolish. Much like yourself. Glancing at Pain and Conan, if you truly believe this is for the best, I understand. Though, you seem to be misunderstanding what he will be like. He corrected lightly. The leader gave an interested look, motioning for him to continue. What you say is true, but only of firstborn Uchiha. Secondborn Uchiha tend to be much different as they are raised for different purposes. Firstborn are raised to become powerful shinobi, and secondborn and are raised as spears. In the Uchiha clan, you need to swap eyes with a close relative to gain strong visual power, and unlock a special technique for the Sharingan. Even though he had to sound casual about mistreating his brother to keep up his cover, he still felt terrible. But he knew this would help his case to get Sasuke away. For years parents went after the eyes of their children and vice versa, siblings after each other, even cousins would spill each other's blood, in the rare hopes of getting this power at the cost of a loved one's life. So eventually the clan stopped treating second-born as children. They are trained to be ready to give blood, eyes, or even their lives for firstborns from birth on. Unfortunately, now that our clan is dead, he'd do a 360 and become a power-hungry demon, now that he has no one to serve. There was complete silence for a moment before Deidara spoke. Fuck, I knew the Uchiha were cold, but that's just brutal, man. The others agreeing with Deidara for once. Itachi mentally facepalmed as he saw Conan, even more determined to get Sasuke now. Then we will take whatever he has become. All the more reason to pick him. He's one of the few people who could heal you if your eyes go further down the road they are taking. If Uchiha would grow up and just do a medical eye swap, then no lives would be wasted at all. She pointed out with a light scold. Well, Itachi couldn't disagree there. He had pointed this out to his father a number of times, actually. Well, that is true. He frowned. He knew there was now no changing her mind, and he would have to live with it. Hopefully, he could change his plans a bit. Pain glanced around Itachi, Kisame, Toby, and Conan. You four will go, treat this as any other mission. Conan is in charge. He narrowed his eyes. Any insubordination will be punished severely. Figuring it couldn't hurt to make Conan happy. How hard could one kid be? Sasuke was sitting in the park, using his kunai to draw pictures in the sand. His recent friend, Gar, sat beside him. Gar was using his own sand to make faces in the sand, much to Sasuke's amusement. The 6-year-old watched as 4 figures came closer, quickly able to realize they were coming directly towards him. Gar began to look nervous as they came closer, holding tighter onto his teddy bear, as a female began kneeling down to smile at them. The Akatsuki members were all disguised, but Sasuke quickly felt his older brother's chakra, and leaped to his feet as they approached, trying to motion Gar along with him. Conan reached out, however, taking hold of Sasuke's sleeve lightly. Hey there, you must be little Sasuke. She greeted warmly. She was surprised, however, as the sand from the box quickly moved up to wrap around her arm in a crushing grip. The sand easily went through the paper, but she still had not been expecting it. She glanced over at the now frightened, red-heated boy, his eyes welled up, and sand began attacking Conan's paper body. Let go of him, he demanded, clutching his bear tightly to himself. Toby moved closer, feeling the chakra of the one-tailed beast, and becoming interested. Oh, we have a scary little monster here, don't we? He playfully spoke. The slight widening of Gar's eyes did not go unmissed by the Akatsuki, as the 6-year-old sand circled Toby's body, attempting to squeeze him to death. Toby actually chocked for a moment before Naruto ran over. The blonde looked at Gar, raising a hand and pointing to him. No, Gar. No attacking with your sand, you're in control, remember? The child instructed fiercely, leading Gar's sand to loosen before falling completely. The tears had sprung up by now, and Gar pointed at Toby, but he called me a dot, and she touched Sasuke. Naruto immediately understood and stormed towards Toby, hand on his hips. Toby also sensed the chakra of the Nine Tails, and became twice as interested as the little blonde barked. You all better get out of here, or else, he warned, though none of the older ninjas seemed impressed. Toby broke the slowly creeping silence as he pointed to the 2-tailed beast holders. Conan. We should take them with us too, they look like fun. He hummed, giving the underlying order Conan wasn't expecting. Conan glanced at him with an unsure look. We can't just take them away from their parents, Toby. People would come looking. She pointed out lightly. We agreed on Sasuke because he wouldn't be missed. It's dangerous to up and take 2 children. Who knows how powerful their families are? Especially the one with the sand. She argued. Itachi by now had gone over to pick Sasuke up in his arms, the child too scared to make any noise. Kisame noted, well, actually the blonde kid is kind of one of the most known orphans. His parents died of special circumstances. Glancing at the blonde, I'll even tell you who they are if you don't try to run. Though you are right, Conan, the kid with the sand does belong to a powerful bloodline. Son of the Kazekage. The man ordered me to kill his son once. The kid nearly ripped me to shreds with that sand of his. After a few tries, I said fuck it and got bored. The shark waved it off. Conan quickly turned around to look at Kisame. His father did what? She asked. She took a moment to process it before shaking her head. Okay, fine, Toby, fine. But we have to hurry before anyone else sees us. It isn't safe to be out in the open like this. She sighed. Toby giggled, opening his arms and motioning for the child to follow. Gar slowly stood up, inching his way towards the man, but keeping his sand up just in case. He ended up standing beside Conan, finding her chakra to be less threatening than Toby's. He looked up at her slowly. Sasuke, and Naruto will be there too? He asked quietly, holding his toy close to him. Conan smiled and nodded. They soon all headed off, towards the exit of the village through the back. They got a few glances, but as they had changed their appearances, no one took great notice of them. That, or they simply didn't care. After all, the great nations weren't exactly known for being protective of their orphans or children for that matter. Their attention was pulled away from the gate when they heard a small clearing of the throat. Their attention turned to a little girl with dark blue hair. She was fidgeting with her fingers, and they could tell easily she was nervous. She seemed to force the words out. "Where or why you going with Naruto?" she asked, and they could easily see the girl's silver eyes and identify her as a member of the Hyuga clan. Beside her was a boy a bit older, arms crossed and head held higher in pride. He wore a band around his head, and of the 4 ninjas, only Itachi knew what it meant. After all, the Hyuga clan didn't go around shoving the fact they enslaved their own kin in others' faces. Itachi only knew due to the close relations of the Hyuga and Uchiha. Sasuke by now had come to his senses and was beginning to squirm in his brother's hold. "Let go," the younger growled. The boy from the Hyuga clan spoke, voice full of authority. "I am Neji Hyuga, and this is Lady Hinata. By order of the Hyuga clan and the village, let them go," he demanded calmly, hand in front of his nervous cousin. Naruto looked confused, not sure why Neji and Hinata were so against them going with the man and woman. Itachi sighed and tossed his brother unceremoniously towards Kisame, who caught the kicking boy without any troubles. All the other Akatsuki members were surprised by Itachi's gentle but strong voice as he spoke. "I know who you two are. It's been quite some time since I saw you two though. Lady Hinata was just a baby at the time." He smiled. "I also know that order holds no influence over us for 2 reasons. 1, we are from your village. 2, you aren't a member of the head household." The 8-year-old's face flustered with embarrassment, glaring at the teen. "I don't care if I know you or not. Let Naruto and the others go. Or I'll tell my uncle. He'll have you caught by dawn." He spoke despite the terror of being outnumbered and overpowered. Itachi by now had moved to stand just in front of the 2 Hyuga children, the girl shyly moving back. Itachi reached down and slid the boy's headband down, revealing his seal mark. The brunette's hands flew up to hide it in shame, but Itachi easily caught the smaller hands. He leaned in slightly to look at the prodigy. "Will he now? I presume you'll be ready to be laying sick in bed with a headache. Well, all this happens too then. I know how your uncle is. He'll use this as a reason to activate your seal, won't he? After all, you didn't fulfill your master's wishes, nor did you stop her from running face first towards a group of deadly S-class criminals." The boy's eyes widened slightly, tugging away from Itachi. He hated to admit it, but Itachi was right. His uncle would activate it for minutes on end for allowing her to go into such danger. Not to mention she would be severely punished and forced to pack on more training for months. Itachi's eyes now gentled. "Now, how about you two come with us? That way you don't have to worry about being punished anymore, and Lady Hinata can live without all that terrible stress and her father's mistreatment. Then it'll be best for your clan too, since your uncle can focus on her younger sister to become heirs freely," he suggested. Conan went wide-eyed at Itachi. Pain is already going to react badly to 2 extra children, but 4. We really shouldn't do this. She scolded quickly, not sure she could handle 5 children anyways. That, and she would at least like to be asked first. The older Uchiha glanced back. "Would you rather us kill them, Conan? We can't let the information leak. So let's take them with or we kill these 2. Which would create chaos in the village, and both being from the Hyuga, risks Konoha thinking it was another village or clan. Leading to war," he warned coldly. The purple-haired girl hesitated, sighing heavily and nodding in agreement. She didn't want war, nor to kill innocent children. Sasuke had calmed down by now, though he still clutched the Akatsuki code of Kisame with a slight shake of fear. He was too smart for his own good, much like Neji, not knowing what the criminals wanted with them. Naruto gave a clueless look, not understanding Neji's fear, and busy focusing on the fact his parents would soon be revealed. Gaara looked nervous, but didn't want to send his only 2 friends to their deaths alone or without help. Neji was nervous as well with Gaara, not willing to sacrifice Hinata's life, despite his growing resentment to her side of the family. The promise of not having his brain abused was also an added hope. Hinata slowly inched towards Itachi, who lifted the little girl up in his arms. Neji slowly moved to stand beside Itachi, nerves hidden as he walked by the teen back to Conan. The woman sighed. "This would be fun to explain to Pain," she mentally drawled. 000000000. They soon arrived at Omegakure, though the gates did not open immediately as they normally would for Conan. She stood, holding Hinata in her arms with Neji by her side. She had to admit, it was cute how protective he seemed of her. Sasuke dragged his feet the entire way beside Conan on her other side, as far away from Itachi as possible. Gaara put himself beside Naruto, the 2 boys making a subconscious wall between the other members and their friends. Kisame and the other Akatsuki members kept their distance, not interested in unnecessary drama before they got home. One of the many gate guards looked down from the watchtower, calling down through the rain. "Lady Conan, who are the young ones with you?" he questioned politely to the village's second-in-command. She looked up, calling they are guests of Pain and future citizens of this land. "You can come down and do your search if you wish. I know it's the protocol to keep everyone safe," she permitted. The man nodded and used a water jutsu to ride the rain down. The children seemed interested enough in the technique, too busy watching his movements to question it, as the man turned them in circles, checking for weapons or any threats. All except for a select few. Sasuke jolted back as the man went to take hold of him, only being able to be searched due to his freezing, as he tended to do when afraid. Garu-san had quickly reached out to lash at the man as he tried to search him, only calming down when Naruto held his shaking hand. Hinata seemed nervous, but allowed it with the only objections being her cuddling further into Konan's coat. Soon enough they were inside, the children shivering a bit at the rain. They quickly noticed everyone was wearing jackets and continuing on, as though it were an everyday thing, and Naruto was the first one to speak. He tugged on Kisam's sleeve, the older ninja quickly reacting to it. He turned to look at the boy, alarmed at the touchiness. Naruto didn't seem to notice, however, as he asked, "Does it rain a lot here?" Head crooked. The shark quickly relaxed, looking back in front of him. "Yes, it does. Every day except Sundays when the leader is in the village," he easily answered. What he was not expecting, however, was for the questions to continue on. "Who's the leader? Is it a cage? Is this a different one of the nations? Does he make it rain? Why does it have to rain? How does rain keep you safe? Are you sure you aren't making that up?" His questions babbling on and on as they walked, Kisame giving what he knew which only lead to more questions. Unfortunately for Naruto, however, it would seem not even being taken away by a group of people including his parents' killer would shut off Sasuke's temper completely. He made a point of slowing down just to get beside Naruto and kick him. "Stop it. You're being annoying, dope." He glared before heading back on the other side of Konan. Naruto glared, getting ready to argue back with Sasuke when Itachi interrupted. "We're here." The group stopping in front of a large tower. It appeared to be the largest in the village. The children quieted down, slowly entering after Konan used a seal to open the door. They were met with many reactions, some humored, some annoyed, and some plain horrified. But one thing all the other members shared on their faces was surprise. Finally, after a moment, Setsu was able to speak. "Oh my." He stared at the young children, practically all clinging to Konan. Sasori sighed and returned to the puppet he was working on at the kitchen table. "Great, now we get to deal with a bunch of kids with colds. Lucky us." He spoke sarcastically, shaking his head at the clearly cold and shivering children. Pain headed downstairs, stopping in his tracks when he saw the children. "No. No. No. I agreed to one little boy, and that was the Uchiha. You can't just drag 4 random children into the village, Konan. Take them back now." The woman frowned at him, holding on to the little girl in her arms. "Nagato, you have to listen first. It wasn't my intention to drag home so many, honest. I went for Sasuke, but then he was playing with this little boy." Motioning to Gaara, who stood beside her, teddy bear held close. He was making a scene which attracted the attention of that one. Motioning to Naruto. Then Toby said, "We should just take them with." Kisame said the blonde was definitely an orphan, and he had gone on missions before to kill the Redeed. "So I figure no one would miss them if one is an orphan, and the other is trying to be destroyed anyway." Pain let out a light sigh, orange hair falling in front of his eyes as he tried to calm himself and think clearly. "Fine. That is understandable." Only really agreeing because Toby had indirectly ordered it. "What are the other 2? They're Hyuga. Shinada they are. They caught us heading out." The girl wanted to know where the blonde was going, and the boy threatened to tell his uncle. Apparently the clan's leader. Seeing the look of bafflement from the other members as to why she would bring them, she explained, "Itachi made me aware we either had to kill them or take them to keep who took them quiet. He also noted killing them could lead to war among the nations or even a civil war. Since they're both Hyuga children and one is the heiress. So our only choice was to bring them." Still unsure, Pain noted, "I suppose I can see the reasoning, however, you overlook that they are young and will most likely miss their parents. I don't know who they are, but if one is actively the heiress, then their parent must be alive to control the clan. Konan, they had parents," he pointed out. The purple-haired girl physically pulled the 5-year-old girl into a tighter embrace subconsciously, glancing away. "Itachi knows the clan and how they run. He said their father would harshly punish her and force more training on her for even approaching us. Then he also said Niji would be punished terribly for allowing her." Just by the way he said it, Nagato. I could hear it in his voice and see it in how the kids moved. They would be mistreated. Seeing she was physically upset, the man sighed. "Well, not how I thought this would go, but you know just as well as I, hurting children is not on the top of my favorite things to do. Let's get them dried off. We have plenty of extra rooms anyway for when partners get into it too deep and have to be separated. Not sure why we bothered going for children when 90% of our organization acts like children." He got a few annoyed looks at that, but the children didn't seem to pick up on it. They were too busy looking around with interest. The other members besides Pain and Konan headed off to do their own thing, Itachi fleeing as soon as he got the chance. He had barely had any time to prepare for this. He only hoped he could still fix this. They split them up into 2 groups. Hinata, Niji, and Naruto went with Konan to change. Meanwhile, Sasuke and Gaara headed with Pain to another room to change, so it wouldn't be as crowded. They had a few pairs of t-shirts and shorts they had been planning to let Sasuke use, but now just gave each child a pair. As they entered their room, Hinata was let down on the floor finally. Konan handed Niji 3 sets of clothes. "Here, you go with the younger ones and rinse off in the shower. Do you know how to do it by yourself?" she asked gently. Niji gave her a glare. "I am 8 years old, I'm a child, not an idiot." His pride overtaking his normal politeness. He headed to the bathroom, the children quickly rinsing off and then getting out. Conan waited by the door to give them some privacy. They came out soon, changed. Naruto's head puffed up on top of his head after it was dried off, much to Hinata's amusement. Conan sat on her bed, motioning the children over. Hinata shyly crawled over and sat between her legs as her hair was brushed, the girl's hair going just above her ears with bangs on either side of her head. As her hair was brushed she smiled thinly, enjoying the feeling while the two boys watched in dread. Naruto was next, sitting down in Hinata's spot. The moment the brush touched his head however he was squirming. It hurts, the little boy whined dramatically despite her not even moving the brush yet. She sighed, noticing how knotted the hair was. Obviously, the kid rarely did his hair. It took a good 10 minutes before they were done, Naruto practically leaping away from her. She looked to Neji, smiling and motioning him over. The boy had backed up, leaning on the wall and looking away slightly in defiance. She tried, "Come here, it won't hurt, I promise." She smiled comfortingly. This did little though as the boy only made a slight HMPH. Neji glanced over at her after noticing he was still being looked at, now by Naruto and Hinata as well. "I'm old enough to do it myself. I don't need any help. He reasoned I do it every day by myself." Hinata turning to look at the older woman and nodding in confirmation. Sighing lightly, Conan motioned him over. "Come here, we already are probably behind the Pain's group. They're probably waiting in the living room, let me do it right quick," she asked gently. Finally, he gave in, going to sit by her so she could brush his hair while he sulked. Meanwhile, with Pain, there was a lot more emotion involved in changing a pair of clothes than he thought. He brought them into the room, handing them each a pair of clothes. He waited for them to move, so when they didn't, he merely sat there watching the two stared up at him with wide eyes. Finally, he forced himself to speak. "The bathroom's over there, you two just rinse off right quick and get out of those clothes. Then come back here." Pain had spoken in his normal icy and demand voice, not realizing that it probably wasn't the best idea to do so to a pair of nervous 6-year-olds. The two had practically darted into the bathroom, doing as they were told more out of panic than compliance. About 15 minutes later, Pain heard a large clunk. He moved to the door, knocking. "You two alright?" he called in a weary voice and, receiving no answer, he entered slowly. He came in to see a few things stacked on top of each other near the window, and Sasuke holding his now bleeding lip. Both were dressed, so he pressed on. As he came closer to the two children he reached down to pick Sasuke up. Instead, he got his hand smacked away roughly. It probably would have hurt too if it was his real body, and not his six-path's body. He looked down at the bleeding boy, then over to the nervous Reed as sand floated around them. Pain frowned lightly, not sure where the boy even got the sand. "You put the sand down." He glanced at guard before returning to Sasuke. "You, stand up. We need to fix your lip," he instructed. He heard a panic mumble and sighed lightly. "Speak up, Sasuke. I don't want to die." Pain had to do a double take, looking at the little boy with furrowed brows. When had he done anything to make the boy think he was going to kill him? "Please don't kill us." Sasuke didn't normally get so easily scared, but a few months after everyone you've ever loved being killed, he wasn't in his best mindset. Pain sighed. "I'm not sure where you came to that ridiculous conclusion, but I'm not going to kill you. Nor will any of the others here. Conan, the woman you were with, wanted to have a little one of her own. There are too many orphans to be bringing new children into the world, so we thought to just bring you instead. Things got out of hand, and well now your friends will be staying here too. We aren't going to kill you." Sasuke rubbed at his eyes, but Big Brother is here, and he the Uchiha did what any 6-year-old in this situation would do. He clung onto Pain, eyes watery. The man quickly became uncomfortable with all the sobbing, quickly giving his shoulder an awkward pat, before trying to calm the boy down with SHH. Or a few times a blunt quiet. He was not made to deal with kids. Slowly Sasuke calmed down, though his lip now stung with salt from his tears. Pain moved to quickly patch the boy up, Gar looking them over with interest. At one point the boy reached out to poke Sasuke's lip, interested in the reactions. Anything leading to or coming from Pain always interested him, since he couldn't get hurt. They came out of the bathroom after a bit, Pain not thinking to brush their hair. Instead, he cleaned Sasuke's tears up before heading out to the living room. Conan came out soon after he did, the two older ninjas having the kids line up on the couch. The kids looked happy enough, besides Sasuke's still slightly nervous look, and Niji's slightly annoyed look. The clothes were meant for Sasuke, so they were a bit big on Hinata, and a bit tight on Niji. They would need to go clothing shopping soon. Haida leaned back on the couch, pointing his scythe casually at the children, who moved back reflexively from it to press against the couch. "So, these are the kids, huh? Guess you got what you wanted, Conan. You'll be the fucking mother of the year with all these kids you're stuck watching over." He laughed. Madara rolled his eyes, asking, "So we just going to keep calling them the blonde one and the Hyuga, or do they have names?" he asked with a look towards the kids. Conan sighed at him, as she was just getting to that. "I was just about to have them introduce themselves, be patient. You all tell them who you are, and no threatening them. They'll be under the care of the Akatsuki, so if any of you hurt them you'll be under my boot faster than you can blink." Kisum smirked at her, protective already, eh? Well, I'll tell the guppies exactly who I am. Glancing at the kids. I'm Kisum, and partner to Itachi. And yes, I am part shark due to a jutsu I use. Hence the shark-like appearance. He went ahead and answered the question blooming in all the children's heads. I'm Sasori. I'm partnered with Zetsu. I create puppets and use them to fight. He spoke, keeping things to the bare minimum. He noticed the Reddit grow interested at the mention of puppets, and mentally chuckled. Probably not thinking of the same type of puppets, kid. Haiden spoke in a bored tone, holding his scythe on his lap now. I'm Haiden, a worshipper of the god Jashin. My partner is the Stumbus, Kakuzu. I'm immortal because of my worshipping. I use my scythe to beat the shit out of my opponents. Noticing Conan's glare, he added, I also swear too fucking much. So ignore the bullshit that comes out of my mouth unless instructed otherwise. Dadara rolled his eyes at Haiden and turned to the kids. I'm Dadara, and for some reason, I'm stuck with Toby as my partner. I'm an artist. I use the mouths on my hearts to put chakra into my clay sculptures so they explode. I have the explosion release. He showed the kids his hands. Mixed reactions came from them, Hinata squeaking and covering her face, while Niji covered her eyes for good measure. Gaara looked interested, along with Naruto. Sasuke looked grossed out. Zetsu took their silence as a moment to speak. I'm Zetsu. I'm partnered with Sasori. I have two halves I can split into, but usually, stay as one. He spoke quietly, not one for being overly excited and making a show out of saying a simple hello. Finally, Kakuzu took a moment from his time to greet them. I'm Kakuzu. I'm partnered with Haiden and am immortal much like him, due to the fact I have multiple hearts. I don't like kids, so stay away from me and my room unless you have to. He warned, much to Conan's annoyance. Pain sighed at them, shaking his head. I am known as Pain. I am the leader of this organization and the city you are in, along with Conan as my partner. This is the Akatsuki, a group working towards eternal peace. If you need anything and Conan isn't around, come to me. The kids nodded to this, Conan taking that as her signal to go. I'm Conan. I lead the city and organization with Pain. I use a paper technique as you three saw, so my body is made of pain. I'll try to help you with anything you need, but if I'm not there just go to Pain. Know that no one here is permitted to harm you, so if anyone does then come to me. Itachi was beside Kisum, leaning back comfortably against a chair. He decided to get it over with, knowing every word out of his mouth was one Sasuke would hate, and not wanting to be the last to speak. I am Itachi Uchiha. I am a Genjutsu master as well as a user of the Sharingan. I am partnered with Kisum. His younger brother had refused to even listen to him speak, the other members noticed. I'm Toby. Toby has a mask because Toby likes masks and sweets. Dadara too. Toby loves Dadara, he's my partner. No one can guess what's under my mask. He laughed childishly, nuzzling against the disgusted Dadara. Hinata and Iji both blinked at him, as if asking if he was serious. In union, they both answered Sharingan. The room went silent, the few who knew Toby's true identity unsure how to fix this, while the ones unaware blinked in confusion. Toby was completely quiet in watching them. Shit. The room went silent before slowly Dadara glanced at his partner. I knew I had a good reason to hate you. He muttered. Toby stood after a brief moment, going over towards the now nervous Hyuga, who had picked up they had misspoken. Toby leaned down by them, Hinata reflexively hiding against Niji as the masked man spoke. Ah yes, I forget my cousin clan activates their abilities much earlier than we do. He smirked under his mask, quickly coming up with a way to flip this soul around. He stood up and returned quickly to his more childish appearance. He waved his fingers at his fellow members, and explained Toby is a very good boy. Toby made nice with Itachi, so Itachi made nice with Toby. He spoke, as though that explained everything when in reality it only left the others with more questions. Toby's clan was full of meanies, so Toby said he would go. Toby went and found Itachi. The clan was boring to Itachi, so Toby said it was okay to get rid of them. Sasuke's face turned to one of pure rage at this, though he stayed quiet, biting his tongue, so he didn't say something he would regret. He dug his nails into his legs to keep quiet. The Akatsuki seemed satisfied with this however, the ones who didn't know of Toby's secret identity, assuming he had been kicked out and got Itachi for revenge. While the ones who did know quickly realized this was a convenient lie to keep him covered. Once things calmed down, Toby skipped over to his place by Dadara, sitting down beside him. Dadara looked like his bad mood had doubled, crossing his arms in a bitter sign of annoyance. The Hyuga children were just glad no true trouble had come of it, and no one seemed mad at them. They made a mental note to keep their mouths shut about anything they saw using their special eyes, not wanting any trouble to start. Itachi said nothing of the Toby revelation as he had been one of the few to know of his true abilities. He, Kisum, Pain, Conan, and Zetsu had previously been the only ones to know, but at least now they had a good cover-up. He steered the conversation back in the right direction, knowing this needed to finish soon, so he could have a moment with Sasuke. You were about to have the children introduce themselves. He reminded Conan calmly. The woman nodded, turning to the kids. She motioned to Sasuke, silently telling him to go first. The little boy, not wanting to share too much with possible enemies, muttered Sasuke Uchiha. 6 years old. Sharingan. The other members had expected him to be much different. They knew he was 6 and in an odd situation, but it was hard to imagine someone related to the proud and strong Itachi would be so nervous. Itachi made a note of this as well, remembering how happy and carefree the little boy had been only a few months ago. Had it been then when he was asked, Itachi was sure he would be jumping up and down, explaining how tasty tomatoes are, or how disgusting sweets were to him. Naruto was beside Sasuke, and he was quick to introduce himself with a carefree attitude. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I'm 6'2". My favorite thing is ramen and my least favorite thing is Sasuke. He smirked over at the Ravenet who moved to swat him over the head for the comment. Naruto yipped, team. Covering his head. Pain watched the body, quieting down in contrast to the many comments made by the Akatsuki about the boy being too loud, or the occasional well he has a fire. Uzumaki. He hadn't seen anyone from his clan for years, and never had he seen a blonde Uzumaki before either. Their hair was nearly always red, it was one of their dominant traits throughout the clan. He wasn't expecting this boy to be an Uzumaki, as their clan was also dying out slowly. He glanced at the red-heated boy who was holding his bare clothes at all the noise. If anyone, he would have guessed he would be one due to the red hair and hidden power. Yes, Pain could sense a large amount of power coming from both him and Naruto. Perhaps brothers. Pain broke up the chatter as he looked at the smaller boy. Too small, in fact. He looked sickly. And who are you? He prodded. Gar answered in a voice none of them were expecting. It was like a gentle rasp, his words coming out slowly. I am Gar. I'm a member of the Kazukichi clan. I'm 6 as well. Was all he said. This caught Sasori's attention. A member of the Kazukichi clan. Hayden asked what's that supposed to mean. The Kazukichi clan. There is only one cage for a village at a time. I haven't ever been to the Hidden Sand village besides for a select few missions, but wouldn't it be run like every other village, with the leaders being voted on? He questioned the little boy. The boy's teal eyes watched Hayden as he spoke, shaking his head back and forth. The Kazukichi is voted in, but it's an age-old tradition for my family to become the Kazukichi because of our magnet release. He explained quietly. Pain asked wearily, so then that would make you the main candidate to become the Kazukichi one day. Why would someone order you dead if you're so important to the village's survival? He asked. He had no way of knowing how much the question would hurt the little boy to think about until he saw the light veins appearing in his eyes, which he easily hid from the others. I have an elder sister and elder brother, Tamari and Kankuro. They will take control of the village instead. Tamari is really good at using weapons, and Kankuro is a puppet master. So one of them will just take over, and when they have kids they can just go back to using the magnet release like we always have. Sasori suddenly understood why the boy had held a look of recognition when he spoke of his puppets. He must have been thinking of his older brother. Now understanding, Pain nodded. They all noticed the marking on his head, which is the symbol for love. No one commented on it, however, just as no one spoke about his sand. There was a lot surrounding this boy, but he looked ready to snap if he was asked anymore. So they moved on to the next introduction, much to Gaara's relief. Attention turned to Hinata and Niji, the Akatsuki waiting for them to introduce themselves. Niji spoke first since Hinata was quietly leaning on him and waiting for him to go first. I am Niji of the Hyuga clan. I made and serve as the bodyguard for Lady Hinata. I have the Byakugan. Silently sending out a warning not to mess with his younger cousin, much to the amusement of the older ninja. Kisum raised his brow at the bodyguard information, as he was once a bodyguard for his village's top secret information. He was one of the youngest in the bodyguard department, and even then he was 15 at the time. This little squirt was an official bodyguard. He doubted it. Lady Hinata. Sounds important. Shouldn't they have someone a bit older guarding someone with such a high title? He pointed out. Niji glanced at him, blank silver eyes a bit unsettling to the missing nin as he was watched. Her bodyguard needs to be around her age to help strengthen a sense of loyalty. That way when her life is threatened the guard has no issue in giving up their life, he explained easily. Kisum nodded in understanding, smirking a bit. Maybe he and this kid could get along after all. Finally, it was only Hinata left, so the little girl remained laying against her older cousin's side. I'm Hinata of the Hyuga clan. I'm 5 and also have the Byakugan. Niji Nai-san is my protector and teacher. She smiled, glad at her lack of stuttering. The Akatsuki nodded, looking at the youngest of the group of children. They could tell she was shy, which would be something they weren't used to, since most of the members were either dangerously quiet or annoyingly loud. It didn't take long before Sasori sighed. It's nearly 9 p.m, the small ones are probably tired, and me personally I'm hungry. So we should probably get dinner going. If memory serves me right, it's your turn to cook tonight, Itachi. The older Uchiha nodded, and soon the ninja all dispersed. Kisum headed to his room, which was shared with Itachi, needing to get a few things sorted out from their last mission together. The members of Akatsuki shared rooms, Pain claiming it would help them knit closer together, so they would work better in fights alongside each other. Sasori got up, heading to clean his puppets up off the table. After a moment of hesitation, Gaara followed Sasori into the dining room. He stayed at a distance, watching the older ninja clean up. Eventually, the sand ninja looked up to see Gaara watching him from a few feet away. At first, he was unsure of what to say, not used to being around children. Though, if his kid would be living with them, he knew he couldn't just ignore him for years to come. "Hey, kid," he greeted. Gar approached slowly, holding onto his bear tightly as he looked at the puppet on the table. Gar looked like his emotions were conflicting, his eyebrows wavering slightly, much to Sasori's confusion. The little boy's hand shook, as though trying to shove back emotions. Sasori asked, stopping the cleaning of his Kazukichi puppet, "Hey kid, what's wrong? I thought your brother used puppets too. Are you frightened?" He tried. Sasori's hand came down to touch the boy's shoulder, though his hand quickly blocked it off on reflex. Gar held onto his bear tightly, pointing at the puppet with an almost confused look. "Grandfather." He looked up at Sasori. The older Redeed quickly realized what was wrong, and moved to glance between his puppet and Gar quickly. "Oh, that's right, with the Sand Village the Kazukichi title is passed down through the family that would make him your grandfather. Oh, here, don't be upset." He panicked slightly as Gar grew more confused. He could tell he was more confused with his own emotions than why his grandfather was made into a human puppet. He did the first thing that came to mind, and that was to activate the puppet. He had the large item stand up in front of Gar, the boy looking up at it in slight awe. Gar himself was having a hard time other than the obvious reasons. He reached his hand up to touch his head where the symbol of was. He could still remember the day he put it on himself. To represent the fact he was a demon who only loved himself. After all, it had only been a year or so since his uncle had died, dropping the bomb on him that no one could love a monster. Gar had no idea why he felt a tinge of sadness at seeing the puppet. After all, he had never seen or met him, the man dying before Gar was ever born. He had only heard stories of the man's bravery and loyalty to his village. He supposed it would have to be due to his older sister's stories about how great he was, nothing like their father. Kenkuro had even shared a brief few stories of the older man. Gar may have been disconnected and have more hatred in him than most adults, but that didn't mean he had been able to fully throw away his emotions just yet as he wanted to. Gar moved forward, hugging the puppet around the waist. Sasori watched, hesitantly moving to use his puppet to stroke the boy's hair. He was surprised to see the sand not blocking it. Gar soon enough let go, wiping his eyes to prevent any building tears from falling. Sasori quickly sealed the puppet, going over to look at the younger sand ninja. He was curious about where the hell the sand was coming from, and why he refused any physical contact, but if there was one thing being in the Akatsuki taught him, it was that everyone has their own demons to handle. He wouldn't force it out of Gar. After all, it wasn't like he himself would be sitting down with pain anytime soon to talk through his abandonment issues. "Come on. It smells like Itachi is almost done with dinner. Let's set the table." They headed off to do so, Sasori just glad the kid hadn't been more rash and thrown a tantrum. After all, if he saw his grandmother made into a puppet when he was his age, Sasori would have lost his shit. They made the table, not in any rush since the others were preoccupied. 000000000. After they had all split off, Naruto had decided it was best to wander around to get to know the place which was apparently his new home. He checked out the first floor and found that a majority of it was the living room, bathrooms, kitchen, and dining room. He then headed upstairs to see that was where most of the rooms were located. After being shooed out of more than one room he became aggravated, moving on to the third floor. He was surprised to find a large library-style room, bookshelves upon bookshelves lined up on the walls. He smirked as a thought flew through his mind. A dork's, specifically Sasuke's, fantasy. Naruto noticed a large bed in the center and walked over to it. He pressed against it, tilting his head. Was this a bedroom or library? He got up on the bed, only finally spotting the other man in the room. He sat with his back turned to Naruto, in a chair which faced the window. Naruto slowly got up, inching towards the man. He came up beside his large chair which looked out onto the village, asking, "Who are you?" Since he hadn't seen him in the house previously. The man was deathly thin, his bones easy to see through his body. He had a pair of purple eyes which Naruto didn't recognize either. His red hair was swept to the side, the man's body so still Naruto wondered if he was dead. Finally, he got an answer. "I am Pain. You shouldn't be up here, young one. I assumed you would be getting to know the other members," he commented. The younger Uzumaki pouted a bit. "I thought the guy with the orange hair was Pain," he asked with confusion. "I tried saying hey, but they just kicked me out of whatever room they were in." He sulked, looking up at the older male who gave a dry chuckle to that. "Are you okay?" he asked after a moment of the man going into a coughing fit. Pain nodded a bit, wiping some blood from his mouth as to not scare the boy. "The orange-haired male is one of my 6 paths. Think of them like puppets I can see and walk around as," he explained, turning his head to the boy. "They'll warm up to you eventually. Just give it time," he assured the boy. Shaking his head lightly he added, "I'm fine, just a bit sick is all." Naruto nodded lightly and thought for a moment before suggesting maybe cough drops will help. "The man who took care of me when I was little used to give them to me and then I wouldn't be sick." He smiled as the idea popped into his head. The older Uzumaki smiled tiredly at that, slowly moving his hand to pat the boy on top of his head. "I'll try that. Thank you, Naruto." He praised, though knew his issue was a lot bigger than a cold. He asked, so you're in Uzumaki, you said. Seeing the nod from Naruto, Pain commented. I'm in Uzumaki as well. I've never seen one with blonde hair. Normally they have red. He noted. Naruto smiled excitedly at that. Really? You're in Uzumaki too? I've never met someone else with the same last name before. He leaped up and down in excitement, much to the older man's amusement. I don't know why I have blonde hair, but I'll be finding out soon. Kisum promised if I came with them he'd tell me who my parents were. Before Pain could say anything, Konan entered. Seeing Naruto, she frowned, going over to them. The boy frowned back at her as she approached. Naruto, what are you doing up here? Since the boy just shrugged, she sighed and turned to Pain. I'm sorry, Nagato. I didn't know he was up here disturbing you. She apologized, noticing how tired he seemed. Pain waved it off as he excused it. He wasn't disturbing me. We were just speaking is all. He assured his friend. Seeing a light nod from Konan, he smiled to her thinly. However, both quickly noticed the frustrated look on Naruto's face. First the guy with the orange hair is Pain, then he's Pain, now he's Nagato. Why can't you people make up your minds? He groaned in annoyance. Konan smiled at the boy with a light shake of her head at his childishness. Pain waved him over, and the boy obligated. Pain is what I go by. Nagato is my real name, but only my close friends get to call me that. Would you like to call me Nagato? He offered, unsure why he had taken a liking to the boy so quickly. Konan also seemed surprised at the offer, but said nothing as Naruto quickly nodded in excitement. Since the little boy rarely had any friends, he was eager whenever the chance to form a bond came. Naruto asked happily, you'll be my friend. Unused to such offers due to the village's dislike for him. He never knew why he was disliked, but he knew he was by the parents, and then that hate went on to the children. So to have someone who didn't seem disgusted by him was a miracle to him. The older Uzumaki nodded lightly, unable to say no to this small ray of sunshine. Konan smiled at the two, glad they seemed to be getting along. Well, dinner is probably almost ready. We should head down, Naruto. Nagato, I'll bring you a plate when it's done. The red-haired man nodding as he heard this. 00000000000. Niji and Hinata had ended up sitting beside each other on the floor of the bedroom which Konan had shown them as Niji's. Since there were exactly 5 rooms for in case half of the 10-member pairings needed a break from each other, there were exactly enough for the children. Though, now it looked like Tadara would have to get over himself and room with Toby, now that the spare rooms were taken. Niji and Hinata were playing Miss Merrimack. Niji was speaking slower since Hinata wasn't exactly the quickest at speaking, even if it was a game they had played for over a year, since Hinata learned to speak in full sentences. Miss Merrimack all dressed in black, with silver buttons, all down her back. She asked her mother, for 50 cents, to see the elephants, jump the fence. They jumped so high, they reached the sky. And they didn't come back till they smelled pie. They continued on playing it for a bit, Hinata too shy to speak to the other members, and Niji still unsure of their new home. They played for a bit, and luckily no one came to bother them. Niji honestly hoped no one would go after Hinata as he would have to protect her, and he really didn't think he could lay a hand on any of these men or Konan. It never even occurred to him that he technically wasn't being forced to protect her anymore. It was odd, the idea of his curse mark no longer affecting him. It almost seemed unreal. So he shoved it aside, not willing to face this life-changing truth. Soon enough Konan came in with Naruto, the woman waving him and Hinata over. It's time for dinner. Let's go you two. She smiled a bit as they scrambled to stand up. They came over by her, nodding a bit and heading towards the dining room. Itachi was setting the now full plates down on the table, Sasuke helping him. Though, they noticed, the boy didn't look like he was doing it for fun. No, it looked more like Itachi had asked him to help, and he had been too scared to say no. They all sat down, and they were lucky the table was one of those old-fashioned ones which were long enough to fit an entire clan into. Itachi had made an omelette for everyone, which the older members quickly ate without complaint, besides a light scowl from Tadar. Sasuke also ate it quickly and quietly, along with Niji and Gar. Hinata tried to eat the large omelette, but it kept slipping off her fork and onto her plate, since she couldn't get too good of a hold on it. Then when she did, it was hard to bite into the large egg. After a bit of watching her struggle, Niji sighed quietly, reaching over to cut it up for her. Itachi noticed that and made a mental note to cut the food up for them. Niji, Sasuke, and Gaara were old enough they knew how to do it themselves, but Hinata didn't seem able to grasp it quite yet. Once her omelette was cut up she ate it much easier, smiling at her older cousin who seemed to ignore her after he helped with the food. Plates were quickly cleaned, all besides Naruto's. The boy had made quite the mess, using his chopsticks to go through and remove every single vegetable Itachi had placed within it. Naruto ate the egg and rice however, only leaving the greens on the side of the plate. After all, he was used to eating ramen and maybe at best some takeout sukiya. He hadn't had a real meal like this one in, well, ever as far as he could remember. Dinner went by in silence, the members usually talking about their latest killer mission, but not sure it was a good idea with the kids listening. Then the kids said nothing as to not break the silence, or being too distracted with food in Naruto's case. Dinner came to a close at last, and Kisame got the dishes, Konan heading over to the side of the table where the kids had been eating. She lifted Hinata up, Niji quickly joining beside her on reflex. Konan smiled thinly. Come on you four, let's get to bed. She spoke, confusing the kids as to why she said four. Until that is, Itachi came behind Sasuke. He set a hand on the little boy's shoulder, which twitched in response. Itachi looked down at his fidgeting little brother, speaking in a commanding voice. Follow me to your room. We need to speak. Sasuke followed Itachi towards his room, silent with his head dropped and hands shaking a bit. He had glanced over at Niji, looking to see what he should do. After all, the Hyuga was the oldest of them. So Sasuke figured he would know what to do. Unfortunately, Niji looked just as lost as the Uchiha in terms of what to do. Niji watched as they split off into separate rooms, giving Sasuke an apologetic and unsure look. As they got into Sasuke's room, Itachi picked him up. The 6-year-old gave a slight screech, kicking at his brother in surprise, while swinging his fist at him rapidly. Itachi hadn't actually touched him since the day of the massacre when he had struck the younger one. Sasuke was quickly let go of and put on the bed, the ravenet backing up until he was on the far side of the bed away from Itachi in a defensive stance. Watching his younger brother go into a panic for a moment, Itachi sighed. Sasuke, calm down. If I wanted you dead, you would be dead, he warned lightly. The younger Uchiha slowed his retreatings, but still found himself unable to stop shaking like a leaf. He had been in shock that night when he came home, and now that the deaths and what his brother had done were allowed to sink in, he felt the effects of his fear tenfold. He knew Itachi set to harvest his hatred, but he was too busy panicking to focus on the hate he felt for his older brother. Itachi raised a hand to motion Sasuke closer, but all he got was a raised arm to cover his brother's face. Please, no, I'm not ready yet. It's only been a few months. It wouldn't matter how much I hated you, there's no physical way for me to be ready to fight you yet. I don't even have a properly developed Sharingan yet. I didn't even know I had it until Niji told me 2 months ago. Suddenly realization hit Itachi, and he sighed. The boy thought they were going to fight using their Sharingan in the bedroom. Itachi reached over, putting a hand on his brother's head. You really are so very foolish, little brother. I wouldn't waste my time allowing you to live if it was only to come back and slaughter you a few months later. Nor would I tell you to build your hatred without allowing you time to foster it, he added. He moved 2 fingers to motion the younger over once more. Now, come. I did not predict you and I meeting again so soon nor under such odd circumstances. If you would like to hear the truth behind that night, I suggest you sit down over here. The younger one seemed hesitant but followed his older brother's orders, moving to sit beside him. He grimaced as Itachi began stroking his hair. What truth? You killed everyone. What more is there to say? He crossed his arms lightly and looked away. Itachi would chuckle, if not for the seriousness of the situation. Sometimes I wonder how accurate your IQ scores were, Sasuke. He shook his head back and forth with a slight smile. Highly gifted indeed, he muttered, but seeing Sasuke's face he knew his attempt at loosening the mood wasn't a success. He sighed. You really must look at things from all possible viewpoints, Sasuke. The world is not all black and white. I did what I did to protect you. Seeing the look of disbelief on his younger brother's face, Itachi prepared to speak, giving his half-truth. He couldn't tell him the full truth just yet. After all, Itachi still had a mission to do, and he couldn't risk Sasuke spilling it on accident. He had lied to Sasuke originally as he wanted him to be seen as a hero by the village when he killed his older brother, but now that he had been taken and was to be around other criminals for years, he would have to forsake the plan. The clan was going to hurt you, Sasuke. Seeing the slight eye roll, he elaborated. Sasuke, you are a second-born Uchiha. You know this, but not fully what it means. Haven't you ever noticed how few of the other families in our clan had second-born, and if they did they were treated just like the second class as you were? He pointed out. Sasuke glanced away, nodding slightly. The boy resisted murmuring out a sarcastic reply, listening as his older brother spoke. Sasuke, do you remember my friend Gase? How he never returned from his mission? Sasuke, he was a second child and his older brother had just gone blind. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? The younger Uchiha looked away, shaking his head back and forth quickly in denial. He crossed his arms, shoulders shaking slightly. Mother and father wouldn't do that to me. They love me. He clenched his jaw lightly. Itachi sighed, wrapping his arms around the younger lightly. Sasuke felt his brother pull him closer and ducked his head lightly. He growled, you're lying to me. Even if father didn't spend time with me a lot, he wouldn't do that to me. Mother wouldn't let him. Though it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself than Itachi. Sasuke glared as he moved his fist against his brother's arm. You're just saying that because you don't want to admit you killed everyone. You killed auntie and uncle, even the other people in the clan you didn't even know. How could they possibly be responsible for what would have happened? Itachi could sense the fresh hatred from his brother inside. He rubbed his temple and sighed. Sasuke, now isn't the time to throw a fit. I had to end them too because otherwise, the tradition would have continued for years to come. I had to save you and the future generations who would meet the same fate. Think back to that night, and don't block out the parts that don't make sense or are too painful. Remember everything. Meeting these realities is the only way to move forward. Sasuke still didn't seem to believe him, but he also at least had quieted down a bit. He sat with his head lowered, eyes clenched in confusion. Finally, the boy gave in, murmuring, "I'm tired. Go away." Not wanting to think on it any further but knowing he had to. His head hung low, not bothering to fight it when Itachi lifted him up, sliding him under the covers. He needed time to think. After all, you couldn't always just accept the truth right away when the truth was so bitter. The older tucked him in, running a hand over his head gently before turning to leave. As he was just about to leave, he felt a hand grasp onto the back of his robe. Turning to look down at his younger brother, who glanced away slightly as he asked, "You wouldn't do that to me, right? You wouldn't make me give up my eyes?" He questioned quietly and tiredly. Itachi watched his brother, allowing a hint of a smile to grace his lips, as he promised, "Never, little brother." Shaking his head back and forth. Sasuke nodded a bit, slowly turning over to sleep as his older brother left the room. He had a lot to think about, but he supposed he would have to sleep on it as he was just too tired at the moment. 000000000. Conan set Naruto to bed first, the blonde practically leaping onto the large bed. Luckily he had no distaste for her as she tucked him in, the young Uzumaki finding it much more comfortable than his old bed in the apartment the village had given him. After Naruto had nuzzled into the bed, Conan asked, "Is there anything you need before bed? Do you need to go to the bathroom or anything?" She asked, trying to think of anything he might need before she left. The boy shook his head back and forth, smiling. Her features were much softer than usual as she asked, "What are you so happy about?" The Nine-Tails holder grinned and started pointing to each of his fingers as he spoke. "I got to hang out with Gar and Sasuke team all day, plus Niji and that one girl. Then I got to eat whatever that was at dinner, and now I get to sleep in a big bed. Not to mention Kisum said he was going to tell me who my parents were soon, and I got to meet someone else from my clan. Oh, then I also got to meet you, and everyone else." He smiled. Conan nodded thinly, watching the little boy's excitement slowly wear off into drowsiness. "I suppose it has been a good day for you. There will be many more so come, I promise. You must sleep now, however. You don't want to be tired for tomorrow." Hearing this, the blonde nodded, slowly drifting towards sleep. Then it was on to Hinata. She had told the girl to wait in her room, so she headed over to where the girl was waiting for her. Hinata sat on her bed, hidden under the sheets and silently watching the door. Seeing Conan, she smiled shyly, looking up from her spot in the bed. Conan moved to tuck her in, and the 5-year-old had no issue with this. Conan sat her down in the bed, stroking over the little one's head. Conan spoke quietly, as to not startle her. "Did you have a good day, Hinata?" She wanted to know how today had been for them all. After all, if they were going to be staying with her, she needed to know if they were happy or not. Hearing the slight she frowned a bit. The young Hyuga didn't look particularly upset, but she did seem a bit sorrowful. "What's wrong?" Conan asked gently. Seeming almost startled by the question, the blue-haired girl looked down slightly with a fluster. "I am sorry," he spoke quietly. I was just wondering how Hanabi was doing," she admitted. Since there was no way for Conan to know who this was, she added, "Hanabi is only a baby. I'm her big sister, I'm supposed to protect her." Remembering her mother's words before she had passed only a month or so after Hanabi's birth, Conan frowned at this, not aware the other child was so young. She thought for a moment before suggesting, "How about this? I'll ask Pain to send someone over to check on her every week or so, and we can tell you how she's doing." Figuring she could ask Pain to send one of his 6 paths as a spy. The younger girl seemed thrilled at this, nodding quickly. "Why, yes please." She agreed easily. Hinata just wanted to make sure her sister wouldn't receive the same amount of pressure and disdain from their father as she had been. Conan smiled at the girl, kissing her forehead before heading out to Niji's room. The older Hyuga was in the room just beside Hinata's. His lights were turned off as she entered, and he was already under his blanket with his back turned to her. She stayed quiet, closing the door without a sound. Finally, there was Gar. The young Radid sat in his bed, shifting sand into different shapes as Conan entered. Gar's sand quickly dropped, sweeping, so it pressed against his mattress. Conan came over and sat down by the boy. "Gar, why don't you put the sand away for now? You don't want to sleep in it, you'll get itchy," she prompted. The boy quickly shook his head back and forth. "I need my sand or I can't sleep." He persisted, not wanting his mother's will to leave him. That, and he needed protection in a place so unknown. Seeing Conan's non-believing look, he continued, "It's true, I won't get any sleep without it because it keeps me safe. If I'm not safe, I won't sleep." He tried to explain despite it being hard to describe for him. "Plus I can't make it go away. It stays where it wants." Thinking it was only a case of a young ninja unable to control their powers, Conan suggested, "You could let go of the jutsu for a bit. I promise no one will hurt you here." She assured the slowly frustrated 6-year-old. "No? I mean, I really can't let go of it. It isn't a jutsu, it's a part of me. It's like my skin." He was now breathing slightly heavy, growing upset at his inability to explain. Conan tried to touch his shoulders to calm him down, but the sand quickly moved to cover his shoulder in a protective layer. Conan settled for shushing to try to calm him down, which eventually worked as the boy relaxed a bit. Alright, it's alright. Just lay down and get some sleep. If you need your sand, it's okay. She tried to relax the boy. Seeing he wasn't going to sleep with her still there, she slowly left once he seemed comfortable enough. 000000000. Pain headed down the halls once everyone was asleep, checking over everything to make sure it was in order. The halls were quiet until he heard a soft grunting. He had never had this issue with any of his members before, so he went to check the rooms of the children. First, he peeked into Sasuke's room. The boy's face was contorted into pain, but he was biting on his knuckle to avoid any noise. It was clear he was having a nightmare. It didn't take but a few seconds for Pain to feel a sensation on his foot, and he looked down to see he had set off a capture trap on his foot. The clanging of metal immediately woke Sasuke up, the teen Sharingan activating to see past the darkness. Spotting Pain, who stood watching him with an unimpressed look on his face, Sasuke glanced away in slight shame of the trap he had been unable to resist protecting himself with. Even if he couldn't defeat any of them, he wouldn't go down by being killed in his sleep. Pain took it off his ankle easily and turned around to leave. Setting traps is wise when you're in a new area, however, I doubt any of the other members would be as appreciative to having their leg nearly chopped off. Getting ready to reclose the door when he commented. Also, if you have nightmares often, it's not a good idea to keep things quiet at your age. Go seek help from Itachi or Conan. Sleep deprivation will only lead to a weakened state the next day. He didn't wait for the boy's reply, moving on to the younger Uzumaki's bedroom. Opening the door more wearily now, he was glad to see there were no traps. The young boy laid sprawled out along the bed, snoring slightly. He didn't see anything that would make the grunting noises, so he quickly moved on to Niji's bedroom. Opening the door, he quickly sensed something was wrong. The boy on the bed didn't appear to be moving an inch, and there was no chakra signature. He headed over quickly, not sure what the matter was. Turning the boy over, he also felt no heartbeat. He wasn't sure what to do and began shaking the boy until suddenly he puffed into a cloud of smoke. Pain parted his lips in understanding, moving on to the next room where he assumed he would find Niji. Hinata's room. He opened the door and quickly spotted the 8-year-old under the sleeping girl's bed with a pair of shuriken. Quickly the weapons went flashing at Pain, though the man caught them with ease. Niji's eyes widened at how easily his weapons were caught, almost as though he had thrown them to Pain. The man came closer to him, kneeling down to stare the young boy in the eyes. What he was not expecting was for Niji to practically fly out from under the bed and start attempting to strangle him. The older ninja easily stopped this, but the commotion had woken up Hinata. Seeing her cousin attacking Pain, she immediately backed up, jumping down from the bed to go into the farthest corner. Pain frowned at the miscellaneous clawing or attacks Niji gave, catching his arms, as the young Hyuga tried to hit his chakra points. Pain held him down, watching him struggle as he spoke. I was just coming around to check on everyone and saw your clone. I went looking to see where you were, that's all. I'm not trying to fight or kill you too. Calm down. Niji finally calmed down with an aggravated look once Pain pointed out, if I wanted either you or her death, you would be dead. Just relax. It's the middle of the night, you should be in bed resting. Come now, both of you into the bed. I don't mind you staying with her, but you both need some sleep. He commanded. Hinata slowly complied, but only once Niji headed into the bed hesitantly. Pain watched as the two cousins laid down, Hinata curling up a bit against Niji's chest. He wiped the dirt from his Akatsuki robe, and lightly scowled before leaving the room, not in the best mood after having multiple weapons thrown at him, and having to fight off an attack from an 8-year-old. Now no more fooling around. Get to bed as you should have an hour ago. Finally, it was Dagara, the only one he hadn't checked yet. He supposed that was where the growling and grunting was coming from. Opening his door, the man was quickly proven correct. The little boy's sand was up in the air, swishing around almost aggressively. Gaara himself was a whole other story. The boy's left half was completely gone, replaced by a possum-like image. The possum-looking half held a large grin, while its body looked like it was made of clumped sand. The claws reached up to claw at Gaara's right side, quickly waking the boy up, as sand went to cover the spot which was being attacked. Gaara's teddy bear was discarded off to the side of the bed, a claw mark sunk into his stomach, and stuffing spilling out lightly. Gaara sat up quickly, the boy's grunts and hisses escaping more freely now as he clung onto the sheets. N. He gasped out, trying to silence himself as he noticed the older in the room. Quickly, Pain activated his Rinnegan to take over the tailed beast's will. It was a bit difficult as he had only heard of the technique, but he eventually pulled it off. The beast slowly subdued, Gaara's eyes widening at the disappearance of his beast. Pain noticed the slight shake to the boy and came closer. Little one, are you alright? He questioned wearily. Gaara's sand was floating around them lightly, as if in a warning state towards Pain. Gaara looked up at him, hands still covering his mouth, in an attempt to keep his cries silent. After a moment of compassing himself, Gaara finally reacted. He backed up a bit, the sand forming a protective layer over him. Pain watched as the boy completely refused to answer him, his eyes only steadying in on him in a weary way. When he reached out to touch the boy, his hand would only move to block him. He sighed, not able to help the boy at all. It seemed as he refused to even allow Pain the chance to touch him. After a few tries, Pain stood and headed towards the door. "Get some sleep and awake me if that beast comes out again." "Third floor," he commanded before heading out of the room. Honestly, these Bear Academy-aged children seemed to have big. The next morning, the Akatsuki woke up as normal. The children weren't making too much more noise throughout the night, beside the few incidents where Pain quickly put a stop to them. Even then it was barely any noise, just a few traps he stepped in, the puff of smoke from the clone, the small attempt at a fight, and Gaara's demon being released. After being confronted by Pain, however, they must have known better than to make any more physical traps or start anything else. Plus Gaara's demon was away for the night, and he planned to take advantage of it to get some sleep. It was their normal waking time, around 7 a.m., and no one had woken them up. They all got up to head downstairs, besides Toby, who headed upstairs to Pain in Conan's room. He slept in just as Conan was preparing to leave, his posture less relaxed and more rigid as he looked to Pain. "You saw the beast last night," he noted. Pain's six paths nodded a bit, and Conan gave a puzzled look since she had been asleep. "That child will be of great use to you one day. As will the small blonde one, he holds the nine tails though he doesn't know it yet," the masked man commented. The older Uzumaki nodded a bit, so this was the abnormal chakra I sensed when he was standing close to me. "I'm sure one day these children will have no issue ending their power for our cause. Though, it is now going to be a tedious step finding a way to extract their tailed beasts without killing them." Waving a hand dismissively, Toby dismissed it. "The time wouldn't be right for many years. Over time you and Conan can gain their trust, then use it to get the tailed beasts event the cost of their lives. They'll be teens at the time of the extraction, so they'll be more vulnerable emotionally. This could work to our advantage." Conan frowned at this, Pain's face hardening as well. "We will not take their lives in the process, Toby. There is surely a way to extract the beast without killing them, there just hasn't been the proper research done yet to figure out how," she commented, already growing attached to them. Toby wasn't convinced there was any other way, but decided to allow them time to get more invested in his plan. After all, he had only offered them his assistance a few months ago. It was no surprise they still weren't totally in row with his values. Hopefully, he could build on the next few years and use their hard work during this time as an excuse to have them not give up. The only real risk was them growing too attached, but surely they weren't foolish enough to turn against him. "Very well. You have 10 years until the plan goes into action. Perhaps you will surprise me and find a way around it. Just don't grow too attached. Though, if you won't make the sacrifices needed to protect this world, then I will. Remember that," he warned, turning to leave the two of the ninjas. 0000000000. As he left Conan to let out a breath, glancing away. She would need to start as soon as possible if she wanted to keep them safe. Just as soon as Gaara found it easier to lower his shield. "I never would have imagined the villages would place those monsters in children. They're so young. Now I understand why Gaara tried to strangle Toby when he called him a little monster down at the park. He didn't see it as a nickname, he saw it as an insult. Oh spears, and they didn't even tell Naruto. The poor boy has no idea." Pain nodded a bit. "I wouldn't be surprised if they faced a lot of mistreatment from the villagers. It's really just two extremes. Either they would be admired by everyone or shunned by everyone. Based on how small their friend group is, I would guess shunned. Though, at least it lets them know who their true friends are," he noted. Conan sighed, sitting down on the bed and looking over at him. "We'll just have to find out how to extract the beasts without killing them. We'll also have to work on reversing whatever damage was done to them at the hands of the village. But they aren't the only ones." Seeing the look of prompting from Pain, she explained Sasuke is skittish and untrusting. Niji and Hinata are nervous and defensive. Good in general, bad for the mental state. I can only guess it would be due to clan reasons for both. Sasuke for having a person he trusted spit in his face, while the Hyuga for being mistreated in the clan. I'm not sure for what, but Itachi mentioned it yesterday. Pain nodded a bit in understanding. "I see. Yes, being defensive at all times is good when in a fight or around enemies, but over time it wears away at a person's mental state. Twice as fast the younger someone is. Being truly mentally insane in battle won't work out well, not to mention it will damage them even out of fights." After nodding in agreement, Conan mentioned, "I had a conversation with Hinata before bed last night. She was crying. Apparently, her sister is only a baby, and she was worried about her. Hanabi was her name, I believe. She was really upset about the idea of not being able to protect her from here. So I said I would ask about you sending out one of your 6 paths to keep an eye on her, so she could stay updated. I wouldn't mind if it eased her mind. That child isn't like any of the others here. She's timid and sweet. She hasn't been stripped of her innocence yet, and I would like to keep it that way as long as possible. Soon enough we'll live in a world where little girls and boys aren't forced to handle this soul." Though Conan wasn't completely on board with his plan, she would always follow him as they were family. Besides, even if it was harsh, hopefully, it would be like tearing off a band-aid. Only a few short years of unimaginable pain, then the world would be free. They heard a knock at the door, and Conan opened it. Naruto stood in front of the door, smiling up at her. Kisum said it's time for breakfast, he announced. The purple-haired woman smiled, pain coming over to them as well. Alright, let's head downstairs. Thank you for coming to get us. She praised the happy little boy before they headed downstairs. Everyone else was at the table, so they took their seat next. 00000000000. Breakfast passed by quietly, besides the small sound of Hinata gently letting her feet swing as they dangled, and the scrapping of eating utensils against plates. Pain took a quiet breath before starting the normal mission calls he gave as they all ate. Alright, today's missions. I know on the last day there has been a lot of excitement, but we must continue on. Seeing the understanding nods from his members, he began. Conan, I need you in the village taking any complaints the villagers may have as usual. Zetsu, you will split in half and be around the gates. Seeing the nod from his left side and look of annoyance from his right, he continued. Idara and Toby, there is a scroll I need you to send to an important official. It's the reminder for the money he owes. Make sure he understands all the details. Avoiding flat out saying they needed to rough the man up in front of the kids. Receiving a nod of excitement from both, he moved on. Sasori, I need you to go with Haiden and Kakuzu to meet with some men in a shop called the Jasmine Dragon. They'll fill you in on what needs to be done once you get there. Itachi and Kisum waited for their mission, and both were a bit startled as Pain spoke casually. Finally, Itachi and Kisum. You two will need to take care of things here, since I'll be away for the day on a mission in a smaller town nearby. Seeing the look of distaste from Kisum and light sigh from Itachi, he narrowed his eyes. Don't get pissy with me. Itachi has the most experience with children and Kisum, you don't seem to have an issue with children. He added casually as the dishes were cleaned up, besides, you two will need to practice. At this their faces dropped, knowing exactly what they were hinting at. While being teased by the other Akatsuki members for their closeness was nothing new, nor was the idea that they were together. Normally Pain and Conan stayed out of it. Itachi's eyes swept away while Kisum grunted in annoyance. A few snickers came from around the room from the older members, while the kids only blinked in confusion. Sasuke, sitting right beside Kisum on the edge of the children's group, glanced up at Kisum curiously. After a moment he couldn't resist asking any longer. Does that mean you're pregnant? I heard boy sharks can get pregnant, he spoke, surprisingly blunt for him. Kisum's eyes widened as his head whipped around to look at the younger Uchiha, who didn't see anything wrong at all with his question. A few loose snickers came from the older members, while Hinata tilted her head in confusion. Pregnant means you're a mommy, right Nijinai-san? She asked curiously to the older boy whose face was brimming red from the snickers he was holding in. When the older Hyuga nodded, Hinata looked over at the Miss Ninja in confusion. He doesn't look like a mommy. Quickly Deidara took the chance to pipe, at least we all know who the father is. He smirked, receiving a glare from Itachi and Kisum both. Pain sighed with a slight smile. He hadn't meant to turn this into a full-on Kisum moved quickly to slam his fist to the table. I'm not pregnant, damn it. Shut up, all of you, before I get Samihata and make you shut up. He commanded, Itachi standing to remove himself from the situation, rather than get in trouble for putting Deidara and another Tsukiyomi. Good luck, Kisum. 000000000. As everyone dispersed to do their missions, Kisum sighed. He sat on the couch with Itachi by his side, the Uchiha reading. The children all sat in the living room floor for a bit, chattering idly. That lasted for about 10 minutes. Sasuke was the first to stand up, heading to his bedroom. Kisum raised a brow and called out, Kid, where are you going? We're supposed to be watching you, so sit down. He frowned, Sasuke's expression quickly mimicking his. The younger Uchiha crossed his arms in annoyance, used to being able to go where he pleased. Before the clan's death, because his father and mother couldn't care less where he was as long as his academy scores were up and he wasn't misbehaving. Then, of course, these last few months because there was no one to tell him what to do. Don't be so dumb, fish brains. I doubt watching means to literally stare at us for the entire time they're gone. Itachi sighed lightly as he noticed Kisum getting ready to turn this into a full-blown argument, commenting without looking up. Sasuke, don't be so rude. Calling me names is one thing, but calling complete strangers by insults based entirely on their appearance is wrong. Kisum, don't take him so seriously. He's just a kid, and he isn't used to being watched much. Sasuke glanced away in annoyance at the light scolding, Kisum snorting a bit, but letting it go. The Uchiha headed off into his room to work on a few basic shuriken jutsu. He figured the wall would work just fine, after all, that's what he had been using at home, since his target broke from overuse. Naruto asked curiously, jumping up to sit on the couch beside Itachi. Sasuke calls you names. He asked curiously since he thought brothers were supposed to care about each other. I thought brothers were supposed to be nice to each other. He asked, tilting his head. Itachi smiled lightly in amusement. Ah, the struggle of explaining the odd angle to one who doesn't have siblings. Yes, I believe his favorite was always, big fat liar after I ran out of time to teach him something. Shaking his head back and forth lightly. It's hard to explain to someone with no siblings. It's like you and Sasuke in a way. Seeing his puzzled expression, he explained, Sasuke and you are good friends, aren't you? Seeing Hinata pointed out, but you two argue and fight all the time from what I've seen. That's what it's like to have a brother or family member you're close with. You fight, but you'll always be there for each other. I'm sure Gar had a few issues with his siblings. The rivalry is part of having a sibling. He glanced at the two younger boys looking for confirmation, Niji and Gar nodding quickly in agreement. Niji explained, like how I really hate the main family. They're mostly a bunch of jerks, but I still for some reason have a connection to them which makes me care. Like Lady Hinata. It's because we're family. He explained, adding Lady on habit. Gar nodded in understanding, or as I told you with my elder sister or brother. They're scared of me, but I still wouldn't kill them unless I needed to. Like Niji, I don't particularly care for them anymore, but still, some ties are hard to cut. Naruto just looked more confused now. I don't get it. Why would you want to cut ties with your family? Wouldn't you be sad? He asked. Itachi sighed lightly and pat the boy's head. He could see why he would be so confused at them not wanting what he craved his entire life for. It's hard to explain. Perhaps you'll come to understand what we mean after staying here as a member of our Akatsuki family. He noted on second thought, well, hopefully, we'll be bearable enough for you to not want to cut ties with us. He noted. Naruto slowly leaned over Itachi to look at Kisame, who had been listening in on the conversation. Naruto gave him a look too innocent for his face, and Kisame knew easily what he wanted. Later. It's not something to be said in front of other people. The Miss Ninja waved the boy off, much to his dismay. Naruto settled for huddling up next to Itachi, watching him read. Itachi felt a wave of familiarity at this, as Sasuke had always loved curling up to his side while he read. Gar ended up beside Kisame, the Redeed holding his bear, which had a decent-sized hole in his stomach, but not enough stuffing to the point it overflowed unless he squeezed it. Normally Gar's uncle would stitch it, but now that the man was dead, there was nothing to do but try asking Sasori. After all, he used puppets, so maybe he would know. Gar would steal glances at the man's sharp teeth, interested by them as he sat by him, but not huddled to him like Naruto was to Itachi. Hinata had ended up on Itachi's lap, the girl wanting to be held again. After all, her mother had only passed barely a month ago, so she was still in need of some attention. Her mother had been the one to keep her safe and coddle her with attention, so of course, she needed someone to fill the void. Niji naturally had moved to sit between Itachi and Kisame, wanting to be close to his cousin. This was the sight Sasuke was met with as he left the bedroom an hour or two later. They had all fallen asleep, besides Gar. Sasuke made his way over, practically shoving Naruto off to the side to take his place nuzzled under Itachi's arm. Naruto growled at first at being woken up and shoved onto the floor. What's wrong with you, Sasuke? I was sleeping. He demanded. Sasuke only gave an annoyed H-N, choosing to ignore him. Kisame was confused at first along with Itachi at his brother's actions, but he quickly realized why the 6-year-old had shoved Naruto off to the floor. Kisame smirked widely, his teeth showing as he watched the youngest Uchiha. Itachi is just as surprised until he realized what the odd look in Sasuke's eyes was. Jealousy. Sasuke was jealous of how closely huddled Naruto had been to his big brother. Of course of Hinata too, but he didn't want to start anything with the prodigy boy 2 years his senior. Besides, who could hurt someone as sweet as Hinata? The day went on calmly for a while, Sasuke not saying much to Itachi, but no longer sending glares of hatred towards him every chance he got. Niji stayed by Hinata as usual, while Naruto stuck with Gar. Overall they had a good day, staying relatively quiet until the members started returning home. Haiden, Kakuzu, and Sasori were the first to return. The kids quickly scattered away or closer to Itachi and Kisame, not too sure about the zombie combo. Sasori headed to the dining room, summoning his puppets to do some work on. A few had been damaged in their last mission, the owners of the shop having ended up needing some higher-ups killed for their protection. He sighed and sat down, beginning his work quickly. About 15 minutes in, he noticed Gar approaching with an almost shy look on his face. The boy climbed up, sitting in the chair beside Sasori silently for another 10 minutes as they worked. After a bit, Gar looked up at the puppet master and asked Sasori-san, getting the older man's attention. He stopped working on his puppets to look at the younger. Yes, what is it, Gar? Adding in after a second, also you don't need to use honorifics here. None of us do to each other, anyway. Well, besides when Itachi scares Tobi or Jadara anyway. He smiled lightly in amusement, trying to ease the child's obvious nervousness. Gar lifted up his bear from under the table after a moment, and Sasori could see the large gap from what looked like claw marks across his stomach. The stuffing was pushed in best it could be, but some still popped out. Shikaku broke it last night. He murmured hesitantly. Quickly Sasori recognized Shikaku as the one Tails. He was stunned for a moment before reaching out to take the ripped toy. Alright. I can fix it for you. You said Shikaku did it. He asked the little sand boy. Gar nodded hesitantly. It came out when I was asleep, and I accidentally hit him. His eyes were trained on Sasori, and he noticed something quickly. The boy wasn't scared of rejection as he thought, but rather of him saying no to fixing the toy. Which Sasori couldn't help but find odd. He shook it off and quickly began working to fix the stuffed bear, which already had many small lines where he could see it had been stitched back together. He asked lightly, "So you're a Jinchuriki for the one-tails then? That must be difficult to control," he commented. Gar nodded a bit and sat, watching him stitch up the toy he had owned for years. "Sometimes," he agreed, though his voice was strained. He clenched onto his pants since he couldn't hold his bear at the moment for comfort. Sasori asked, "When did it get placed inside you? It's a lot to deal with for someone as small as you." He noted, knowing he himself could never handle it. "Why not wait until you were older?" he added, not looking up from his sewing. He wanted to understand this boy better. He was interesting. His eyes flickered, silently grimacing. "Just before I was born, a week or so before. The Kazukiage was short on budgets, so he needed me to keep Suna's power levels up." Sasori raised his brows, asking he stuffed a demon in his own son, or rather, wife. "I'm sure she wasn't too happy about that," he noted. "Seems like the man definitely had a thirst for power," he added, none too gently. Gara took his bear quickly as Sasori finished and shook his head back and forth. She didn't like the idea of putting a monster inside another monster. He easily agreed, and seeing the light rays of Sasori's eyes, he held his now fixed bear closer to him. "You don't look like a monster. And trust me, I've seen some monsters." It could easily be argued that most of the members in this group are monsters. Though, I doubt she meant in the sense of your personality if you weren't even born. "Your physical appearance doesn't look terribly mean either," he noted. Shaking his head, the boy explained what his father had told him many times, as well as what his uncle told him on his deathbed. "She was dying because she was pregnant with me. I killed her. Monsters kill people." Sasori didn't interrupt him as the boy spoke. Obviously he wasn't used to speaking about it as he paused a moment. "That's why she named me Gar. It means demon fighting for only himself." Sasori frowned. By the sounds of it, if they hadn't taken Gar in with them, the boy probably would have shown up a few years later as a new member of the Akatsuki himself. He asked lightly, "Is that why you have that marking on your head? Did she give it to you?" "What's it mean?" he asked, not having ever seen the symbol, but it looks almost like the symbol for love. Now leaning a bit on the table, hugging onto his toy, he shook his head back and forth. "I put it on after I accidentally killed my uncle. See, it's a mix of the words love, demon, and myself. So it means demon who loves only himself." Hayden, who had been listening in on the conversation, hummed and waving his scythe around lightly. "How the fuck you accidentally kill a man probably years older than you? Killing isn't anything to be ashamed of, you know." Sasori glared lightly, motioning for him to shut up. Gara shrugged, having gotten over killing his uncle rather quick once he realized he wasn't loved. "He snuck up behind me to kill me, and my sand went out by itself. It squeezed his life out," he explained, crooking his head. "What do you mean by not being able to do it by accident?" "I do it without meaning to all the time." Gara noted to himself it was odd, being able to talk about the deaths he had caused without having the other person shrink away in fear or mock him in hatred. He decided he likes it. TSK, that would suck doing it unintentionally. "Where's the fun in it then?" The worshipper huffed, pulling out a drink from the fridge. Looking baffled, Gara asked, "It's supposed to be fun?" Seeing a smirk begin to appear over Hayden's mouth, however, Sasori quickly interrupted the boy's inquiry to the psycho. After all, he didn't really like the idea of Gara going on purposeless slaughters. When Sasori killed, it was to gain more puppets or make a lasting statement. He didn't want Gara to go killing people for no reason, wasting possible future allies or art subjects. Besides, as he said at the beginning, he doubted it would be good for the boy mentally. That is a matter of opinion. Personally, I don't think so. It's wrong to kill without a purpose, such as leaving a lasting mark or protecting yourself. Or to work towards a goal. But you're still only 6, you shouldn't even know what it's like to hurt someone besides maybe pulling someone's hair or perhaps some shoving. You still have a few years to add on before you're ready to handle the mental backlashes of killing anyone. You said it's your sand that does it, perhaps we can work on controlling it sometime. I don't have the magnet release like you do, but I'm still a sand ninja, so maybe that will help," he offered. Hayden looked annoyed at being cut off and moved to his room with annoyance. Gara was unsure about accepting help due to his promise to never allow himself to think he was cared for after his uncle, but reasoned with himself that he didn't need to care or be cared for to learn from the older sand ninja. He nodded in agreement after a moment. After all, being able to control it would be nice. Sasori smiled to the boy, reaching out to lightly pat his head. Unfortunately, his sand didn't seem to trust Sasori yet, as it blocked him quickly. He didn't lose him smile. Perhaps, in time, they would be able to grow close enough for that. 000000000. Next to arrive home was Toby and Dodar, he too entering Zen quietly. Dodar stomped off upstairs, muttering about not watching to spend another second with the stupid Uchiha. Toby, on the other hand, flopped down on the couch next to Itachi, who held Hinata on his lap with Niji and Sasuke on his sides. Hinata had been glancing over at Sasuke for a while now, and finally got the courage to speak with him. She had ended up having a nice calm talk with the older boy, while Niji eyes Sasuke suspiciously, as if daring him to upset her. Toby laid out on his stomach, swinging his legs back and forth as he playfully spoke. Oh, Itachi's going to make a great daddy. He laughed, the younger Uchiha glaring at him and warning to shut up. Toby covered his face, and falsely whimpered, Toby is sorry Itachi-sama. Toby is a good boy. Itachi rolled his eyes, returning to the little girl in his lap and the two boys by his side. He hadn't been this close to children in what seemed like forever. He had rarely even held Sasuke this close since a year before they were split apart. The little boy had been going through that phase where he was strong and a big boy, so he didn't need help. The few exceptions being the many times he was so worn out after training with his big brother, he had simply let him carry him home. Not that Itachi minded. He had missed being looked up to or seeing affection in the eyes of children. All he ever saw anymore was fear, like when he went to other villages when the parents would instinctively pull their children closer. He was glad to have his little brother back, then even more so to have Hinata and Niji with him. He had last seen them on Hinata's 4th birthday, Niji being 7 at the time. Itachi, as the son of the head of the Uchiha clan, had been invited along with his father, mother, and Sasuke. He smiled thinly to himself, remembering his brother's dislike for the situation. Their father had explained to Sasuke that he needed to be nice to Hinata and try to make friends with her. That had not gone over well. Sasuke complained about it the whole way there, saying he didn't want to hang out with the baby. Given, Sasuke had only been about 2 years older than her, but that didn't register in his 5-year-old mind. Sasuke had spoken to the little girl, though his original plan of showing his annoyance for being forced to do so had melted when he saw how scared she was and the intimidating man she stood behind. Likewise, to how Sasuke felt about Hinata, Itachi remembered also Niji's reluctance to be around Sasuke for his age. His trip down memory lane was interrupted however, as he noticed the 3 children staring up at him. He straightened up and his smile faltered, asking calmly, what is it? Much to the children's amusement. You were staring at us and smiling. It was getting kind of creepy, Nai-san. His brother murmured lightly, smirking at him. It was as though Sasuke was treading on ice, testing to see if his brother really was serious about them returning to their old bonds. He wasn't sure though, so he had been adding in small nudges all day. Itachi shook his head back and forth at his brother, knowing exactly what he was doing. I was just thinking about how much you've all grown. I remember a time when you refused to even look at Hinata, let alone play with her. Or a time when Niji wouldn't spar with you because you were a baby. He smirked. Now at least you can hold a conversation. Niji and Sasuke both looked away in the embarrassment of their old tendencies, Hinata letting out a small laugh at the both of them. She looked up at the older Uchiha and explained Sasuke said he would train with Niji and me next time we have a chance. I and Niji usually do it alone, but I bet the Sharingan must be so cool. I've never seen one before. Sasuke spoke, prided by his family's Keki Genkai. That's because it is cool. My Sharingan is already on the 2nd stage. He explained, activating his eyes which had 2 small markings within them. Hinata looked in awe by this, watching his eyes in enjoyment. They're really pretty. She complimented, making Sasuke blush and shut his own down. They weren't supposed to be pretty. They were supposed to be epic, strong, or he would even take interesting. But not pretty. Itachi chuckled lightly at his brother's embarrassment. Niji scoffing, my Byakugan could beat your Sharingan any day. Unlike your clan's weird eyes, ours know our destiny. Plain, simple, powerful Byakugan. He nodded with pride. I've already mastered mine completely. Hinata now turned to be impressed by her older cousin, much to Sasuke's annoyance. Stupid Hyuga. 000000000. Konan and Pain entered in, Zetsu following them. As Pain arrived, Naruto practically bounded off his spot and the floor, where he had been looking through one of Kisam's weapon magazines. He had let the boy use on the condition he was quiet. Naruto zipped past Zetsu to wrap an arm around Pain's leg, looking up at the older Uzumaki. Pain had nearly tumbled over, only able to balance himself because of his being in his 6 paths forms. Once he steadied himself, it was hard to be annoyed at the boy as he looked up at him with admiring eyes. Naruto asked with excitement, how was your day, Nagato-san? The other members quickly looked to the boy, uncomfortable as they didn't know the boy was given permission to call him by his real name. Normally, only Konan was allowed that privilege. So it was easy to assume the blonde was simply overstepping boundaries without realizing it. They were relieved when they had Pain continue on without missing a beat. It was good, and you don't need to bother with the honorifics with us. He commented, lifting the small 6-year-old into his arms. The boy easily held on, leaning into the older clan member while nodding. Pain asked, how about you? Did you have a good day with Itachi and Kisame? Quickly a nod was given and the boy grinned, listing off his enjoyment with his fingers as he tended to do. Itachi was reading with Kisame by him, and we talked, and Kisame made us lunch, and everyone was happy until Sasuke started being a jackass. He pouted. Sasuke glared at him from the couch, yelling over, you're just being an asshole. He resorted, Itachi looking at his brother with slightly widened eyes. When had his brother learned to curse? Itachi lightly backhanded him, Sasuke reaching up reflexively to pout at his elder brother. Hiding was cackling, while Kakuzu shook his head back and forth along with Sasori. Tadara, Toby, and Kisame all looked mildly amused, though Konan didn't find it all that funny. Finally, Zetsu, who had both eyebrows raised, broke the silence as he normally did. Oh my. Hinata repeated, confused by the words as her clan was typically too respectable and uptight to curse. What's a jackass, Niji Nai-san? She questioned, the oldest of the children now looking annoyed. Niji stopped the ongoing argument which had begun between Sasuke and Naruto. Both of you be quiet. You're teaching Hinata adult words. He scolded, the room quickly falling into silence. Sasuke asked in annoyance, if they're grown-up words then why does Naruto say them? He's even younger than I am. He pointed out scornfully to the older boy. Itachi quickly realized where his brother had learned the words from. Damn it, Uzumaki. Naruto too grew annoyed while Kiba said his sister says them. She's only 13, so they can't be grown-up words. You're just making it up and trying to seem older than you are, Niji. He shot back, and it seemed as though Niji was resisting the urge to punch Naruto by now. Pain readjusted Naruto on his hip and frowned at the little boy, moving some blonde hair from his eyes. Naruto, those are adult words. Or at least teenager words at the very least. You shouldn't say them until you're older. You, Sasuke, Gaara, Niji, or Hinata. At least until you're 13. Normally Naruto wouldn't give a shit about what he was told to do, but he settled for listening to the older Uzumaki with a nod. He didn't like the disappointment that was clouding his voice, so he easily agreed. He tucked his head on Pain's shoulder, happy the man seemed to let it go rather quickly. As they all sat down for dinner, Niji found a question nagging in the back of his mind. It had only been 2 days now since they had been taken, but he also knew the Akatsuki couldn't just keep putting missions on hold in favor of a member or two staying home to watch them. He wasn't sure where they would end up going until it clicked with him he had been missing school. Now, he knew most would be relieved to not be going to school, but for him, it made him bored. Talking with the others had been fun and all, but he would go crazy if he did that every day. He looked over at the other children when he realized he was the only one actually old enough that he had been in school before this all. His face remained neutral, but he truly did hope they got something more productive to do soon. As they all were finally seated and food was placed in front of them, they all began to eat. Kisame had made them tonkatsu, remembering to cut up the pork for the children. He also had a pile of cheese off to the side, so they could sprinkle in on the meat if they wanted. Or in Naruto and Tobi's case, so they could dump it all on the pork. They began eating, Pain starting between bites, mission reports. Sasori started. Successful. No one saw us. The income of 300,000 yen. Clients seemed happy. The only damage done on any of us was to my puppets. Also, the building we fought in had to be destroyed because there were a lot of bodyguards trying to come after us. Kakuzu nodded in confirmation, Hayden doing the same. Tobi and Dadara did a good job. Tobi was a good boy and sent the reminder, while Dadara made a big bird for us to fly away on, so no one saw us. We got 10,000 yen extra. Dadara bought Tobi some dango because neither of us got hurt. Dadara is very nice. The masked man spoke with a nod more to himself than to the others. Dadara was quiet, his eyebrow twitching in annoyance with her partner's attitude, but nodding in confirmation. Zetsu's right side began his report. Nothing out of the ordinary. No one came to the gates, but we saw a few search parties from the Sand Village going towards the Land of Fire and Land of Earth. They're looking for Gaara from what we were able to gather without straying too far. There were also 2 Leaf Ninja search groups going out to the Land of Earth and Land of Wind. I would guess they're looking for Naruto, Niji, Hinata, and Sasuke. They seem to assume the children have run away. Sasori, who sat next to Gaara, seemed to notice the boy's silent nervousness. Which made sense of course. The boy being the host of the tailed beast, would mark him as someone to be watched. If he disappeared, it would make sense for the nations to be alarmed. Those who knew about Naruto also connected these dots, even if the boy didn't know it yet himself. They also knew however that eventually the villages would stop their search. After all, they couldn't use that many resources on missing children. Even if they were the heirs to a powerful clan or the last survivor of a clan. Seeing Gaara quietly pull his teddy bear closer, Sasori spoke to the children, as the other members spoke to each other about further details of their mission. Don't worry. No one will suspect you're here. They'll be too busy pointing fingers at the other nations, but then let it go to avoid any fights. Then even if they do find out where you are, we'll keep you safe. We're some of the strongest ninjas in the world, after all. He smirked to ease their worries. It seemed to work, as he got a few smiles from 2 or 3 of them. Their mini conversation was interrupted however as Conan addressed them. So, kids, me and Nagato have been talking and we have a question for you. How many of you have had some sort of education? Whether it be the Ninja Academy or one-on-one teaching from a mentor? Niji raised his hand along with Hinata and Gaara. Seeing the look of prompting from the Uzumaki, Niji spoke in between bites. Ninja Academy. I've been going for almost 2 years now. I've also trained under the Hyuga clan leader, Hiyashi-sama, and his brother, Hisashi-san. He explained, forgetting he didn't need to bother with honorifics. He noticed looks of confusion over a few of the older members, and understood why they would be confused. After all, the age of ninja graduating or even joining the academy was getting later and later each year now. Not too long ago, ninja were expected to enter the academy by age 5, and graduate by age 10 at the very latest. They had only changed this in more recent years. The rules have been changed for the 5 great nations. You have to be at least 11 to graduate plus pass the exams. You also can't enter until you're 7 now, he explained. Kisum almost couldn't believe it. When he was 7, he was graduating and killing off other students to do so. They let them continue on, however, not interrupting as Niji glanced at Hinata. The girl noticed the attention on her and spoke. I've been training under Tausen, she murmured, adding Niji Nais-san also teaches me lessons from the academy sometimes. Hearing the girl speak of her sources of learning, they nodded and decided to move on. She seemed to always look nervous when too many eyes were on her, plus the fact many of the Akatsuki were intimidating looking probably didn't help her any. Gara spoke now. I never actually went to the academy, but I was given the lesson scrolls to read over and practice when I wanted. I got to the 3rd year scrolls. The members understood why, having by now heard from either Sasori or Kisum about him being the One-Tails host. They assumed the school wouldn't want someone so powerful against other students. Even if it was hard to imagine the quiet little Redeed who was currently holding his teddy clothes doing any harm. Conan glanced at Sasuke and Naruto, asking, I know you two said you didn't have a teacher or go to any classes, but did you ever learn a few spare lessons from anyone over the years? She asked, wanting to know about all of the children's level of education as of now. Naruto shook his head back and forth. He had never had anyone take the time to teach him anything. Most didn't think someone like him should even be allowed into the ninja academy. Why, he had no idea. Sasuke shrugged. Itachi and Toussaint taught me some techniques. Besides that, not really. Pain nodded in understanding and took a breath as they all finished eating. Well, I know you all will find this odd, but here in the Land of Rain, we do schooling a bit different. Since there aren't many children here, we have one single class. It has all the children in the village in it, ages varying from 5 to 14. You'll all be attending this school starting hopefully tomorrow. 0000000000. At night it had been a lot easier for the kids than the night before. Pain had gone ahead and warned the other members of the fact they had laid traps in their room, figuring it wouldn't do any damage to let them feel safer. Sasuke still had his normal nightmares, but that was to be expected. Hinata slept with Niji, the two being much more relaxed. Pain had gone into Gaara's room before he slept, tucking him in and using his eyes to force the beast back for a few hours. Gaara slept better, though not much out of habit. Naruto was about to be put to bed, but rather than Conan, tonight it was Kisum. The shark man wasn't great with kids, but he had promised to tell the boy about his family, and he never broke his promises. He laid the boy down on the bed, the blonde looking up at Kisum. He felt a rough hand move to pat his head, and the man spoke. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Those were your parents' names. The little boy looked confused, recognizing the name of the 4th Hokage. Your father was the Hokage, and your mother held the 9-tailed fox inside her, he added, looking at the little boy. They died the night of your birth. The same night as the attack of the 9-tailed fox. When Kushina died, Minato went out to seal it. It needed a new host. Placing it in a host was his last act. Naruto felt the man move his hand down to rest his hand against his stomach. Naruto's stomach sucked in from the touch on reflex and looked down. Kisum had lifted his shirt a bit, revealing his seal. He had wondered what it was, but now it became all too clear. His eyes widened slightly in panic as it all sunk in. The comments of him being a monster. The Hokage's refusal to explain who his parents were. His lack of parents. The 9-tails attack falling right on his birthday. His lack of friends besides Gar, who he knew had a demon inside him. He felt his eyes well up in understanding, glancing up from his stomach to Kisum. His lip quivered a bit as he tried to hold his tears back. I'm a monster, he asked. Kisum was never one to feel pity nor guilt for things that simply needed to be done. He knew the boy needed to know, and that mastering it from a younger age would improve his power greatly. Though, having said that, he didn't see the point in being unnecessarily cruel about it either. No. You have a monster in you. You are protecting those around you from it, just like Gaara is protecting those around him by having the 1-tails in him. You were never told because it was supposedly the Hokage's last request from the rumors I heard. He wanted you to be a hero instead of shunned. That's why the 3rd made a rule of silence. No one who knew about it was to speak of it. Rules won't stop rumors though. Naruto couldn't help it. He didn't want to cry, but it was a horrible thing to learn you were holding a monster in you. He lowered his head a bit, letting the muffled sobs leave his mouth. Kisum's rough hand on his back helped only slightly. Neither of them spoke. It wasn't something you could just get over. Naruto would need time to accept it. 0000000000. The next morning went by quickly. Pain handed out missions, they ate, and Conan got them ready for class. She started with Niji and Hinata. She woke them up around 6:30 a.m., figuring she would give them some time. She went over to their bed, gently nudging Niji who quickly woke. The boy sat up, waking Hinata as well. He asked tiredly, school? Seeing a nod, he got up and went over to the outfit Conan had got for him to wear to school. It was a simple short-sleeved black kimono with black shorts. It had a band to wrap around the waist, so the fabric was pulled back to give the wearer easy combat access. Conan had picked this for all the boys, as it was the school's male uniform. Niji took it to the bathroom, closing the door and quickly getting ready. Conan pulled Hinata's hair into a short ponytail before getting her ready. The outfit she had for her consisted of a kimono as well, though instead of shorts she had leggings and long sleeves. As she was helping with getting her ready, Conan noticed the girl looked very happy. Conan smiled at her with a nod as the little girl asked, "I look pretty like Conan?" She finished by sliding on the girl's shoes before she sent the happy little girl off to breakfast. Niji soon went after her. Next was Gar. The Redid had woken up the moment she opened his door. She smiled thinly to him. "Morning. Here are your clothes for the day. Do you need help?" Seeing the shake of the head she expected, she handed them over. "All right. Well, when you're done go get some breakfast." Gar nodded to her, waiting until she left to change into the clothing. She woke Sasuke next, who sent her a light glare at being woken up. It was almost cute, really. He groggily sat up and took the clothing, though it was obvious he would rather remain sleeping. He yawned, before standing and getting dressed while she went to wake Naruto up. It was odd, unlike the night prior, Naruto seemed less excited. The night before at dinner, he had practically been bubbling with excitement, but now he was much quieter as he got himself dressed without a work. She supposed Kisum had gone into detail the night prior as to how his parents died and what was in him. She still wasn't sure letting Kisum do it was the best idea, after all, he wasn't exactly gentle. But then again neither were any of them. She shook her head at her thoughts. All they could do now was hope he was able to cope with it. From what she had seen so far, she believed he could. 000000000. As Conan led the children towards the school, she noticed quite a few looks of interest. Which made sense, of course, no one in the village had actually seen the kids yet besides the Akatsuki. She ignored this, knowing they would get used to it. She stopped in front of a man with long fluffy blonde hair and blue eyes. He wore a green scarf around his neck and a green headband just under his bangs. He wore an orange kimono, the underside white with a black obi. He smiled at them, waving them over slightly. "Conan-chan. It's nice to see you again. These must be the ninja you were telling me about," he greeted, looking down at them. His eyes traced over the children as he swiftly did an analysis of them. The Redid looked like he would be a quiet but dangerous one. The blonde looked like he had a lot of energy, but was in a soured mood today. The Ravenet looked prideful but for good reason. The little girl looked shy, hiding behind Conan's Akatsuki robes. Then there was the little Hyuga boy, who looked him straight in the eye while standing just as proud as the raven-haired boy. Conan nodded, pointing to each of them as she spoke. Gar, Naruto, Sasuke, Hinata, and Niji. Before turning her attention to the children. "This will be your teacher, Sakatsu. You will call him sensei. He is in charge while you are under his watch. I'll be back to get you all in a few hours." She bowed and left the children with the man. Hinata shifted so she hid more behind Niji now as they headed inside. Once they got inside, they glanced around. The room was open, with no desks as Niji was used to. Instead, the students all sat lined up against the wall. Once their sensei entered, they bowed before straightening up again. There was a large combat mat on the floor, a weapons rack against the left and right wall. In front of the room, there was a board with chalk. "Class, we have 5 new students today." Sakatsu addressed them. The students all gave bows to their new classmates in greeting. The new students bowed back in turn. Sakatsu wrote on the board as he spoke, "We will do as we do with each new class member. After introductions are over we will begin the matchups." Glancing at the new students. "In this class we have rankings. You all will square off against each other and the other students to see who is strongest, and tell me what I need to know of your abilities so they can improve. Class, introduce yourself." A male stood up, who looked to be the oldest in the class. "My name is Sayoi, though you can call me Yoi. I am 14 and I specialize in Bukijutsu as well as electric-based ninjutsu. I am ranked number 1 in the class." He spoke. He wore the school uniform just like everyone else, his blue eyes firmly watching them as he spoke. His short hair was a dark blue, matching his eyes. He was decently tall as well. Next, a green-haired teen spoke. His hair was long enough that it was pulled into a ponytail, his left eye hidden under his side-swept bangs. His eyes also matched his hair, a dark green color which swept across the new students. He smiled, tall but not as intimidating as Yuri. "My name is Shuri, though I go by Shu. I'm 14 too. I specialize in Kenjutsu with a bit of Jinjutsu. I rank 2nd in the class as of now. It's nice to meet you." The pure white-haired boy beside him began. His eyes were crystal blue, his pale face gentle as he spoke, though his voice was strong. I'm 13. I specialize in summoning jutsu and a bit of medical ninjutsu. I rank 3rd in the class. It will be a pleasure to learn with you all." He smiled. There was a slight silence before the next student spoke. He had yellow eyes which looked almost cat-like. Under his eyes were a pair of matching red marks which came down to just above his cheek. His blue hair was much lighter than yours, though still somewhat dark. His voice was quiet but firm. "I am Tatsu, I'm 14. I use Tanjutsu and some medical ninjutsu. I rank 4th in the class." The girl with bright crimson hair smiled to Tatsu in comfort before beginning. My name is Kichona, but you can call me Kicho if you want. I'm 12 years old. I specialize in Maikeki Genkai, swift release. I also use Genjutsu. I rank the 5th strongest in the class. She greeted, purple eyes warm. Finally, it was the boy with the light brown hair's turn. He looked up at them with bright blue eyes, his posture serious. My name is here. I'm 10 years old and focus on medical ninjutsu. I rank 6th in the class. A hint of an embarrassed look on his face at the fact he was the lowest ranking. As Niji guessed, they were all older than them. He decided to start their introductions. I am Niji Hyuga. I am 8. I focus on the Byakugan and Taijutsu. He greeted them, the older students not too surprised to see he was a Hyuga, as they had quickly noticed the eyes. Sasuke went next since he figured he was the 2nd strongest out of them. Or at least he thought he was in his mind. I'm Sasuke Uchiha. I'm 6. I focus on my Sharingan and fire release. Yoi mentally sighed. Why did the new students have to be so young? They knew their sensei had repeatedly told them not to judge a shinobi's ability based on age, but he didn't think he could guiltlessly shoot a 6-year-old full of lightning. Gar was next, his voice quiet and a bit scratchy as usual. I'm Gar. I'm 6 as well. I focus on my magnet release and sand manipulation. They all noticed the Redeed sash was a bit different. While their sash had a place for weapons, he had an area to store sand. Next, the blonde spoke. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I'm 6 too. Sheepishly scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, I have absolutely zero ninja training, so I don't specialize in anything. Their sensei sighed quietly. So he would be starting from scratch with that one, it looked like. Finally, it was the girl's turn and she spoke, doing her best not to stutter. I am Hinata Hyuga. I'm 5. I focus on the Byakugan and Taijutsu. The sensei let out a breath as everyone finished, looking up at the board. He had made a quick tournament so they could get the ranks set up. He hoped these poor children could keep up, but also hoped his older students wouldn't lower their guard too much. You never knew with ninja, after all. Soon enough all the children sat beside the older students on the floor. They sat a few inches away, the teens noticed. Most likely nervous to be around kids so much older than them. Sakatsu pointed to the quick matchups he had made on the board. Alright, since Naruto doesn't have any real ninja training, there isn't much point in him participating. So he automatically ranks number 11. Here are the matchups for the rest of you. He moved to the side to show them. They all glanced at the board, their sensei motioning to the brackets. You'll fight tournament style, then out of the first 5 to lose, I'll rank you based on a skill during your fights. The new students will fight in a section, then the older students in another. Best of the new and best of the old will fight. Then the winner of those fight the winner of Tsuyoi and Shiryu, since you're 2 of the best in class so far. They all nodded in understanding. Sakatsu looked up at the board. First up is Gar and Niji. 15 minutes. You 2 go on the mat and start. No death blows, but don't hold back more than necessary. Here is an excellent medical ninja, and if he can't heal you then I definitely can. He assured the boys. Both got up and headed over to the mat, Sakatsu motioning them to start. Niji's eyes activated in a split second, which the older students to note of. None had ever really seen a bloodline limit besides Kichona's swift release. It didn't take long before they were observing Gar's sand which rose to linger threateningly in the air. Niji started by trying to send his fist in quickly to strike Gar's chakra points. Unfortunately, just as he had predicted, the sand blocks him and Gar didn't even flinch. The sand quickly shot to Niji's body, trying to attack the older boy. This failed however as Niji dodged out of the way. This continued on, Gar's sand swinging at Niji effortlessly, while the Hyuga dodged and defended best he could. He spun, activating the 8 trigrams palms of revolving heaven jutsu. The sand shot off him, making it shoot back in other directions. A bit hit off to the side, snapping against the others' faces. Realizing this would get him nowhere, he tried to at least exhaust the younger boy. He had yet to move an inch, standing in place while his sand assaulted Niji and protected his own body. As Niji attempted to use his gentle fist, the sand blocked each one, and Gar didn't break a sweat. It was frustrating, and Niji quickly knew he needed to figure a way around this for future training sessions. His ninjutsu was also ineffective, the boy's absolute defense rendering the prodigy helpless. Once he was too tired to do anything more, Gar moved his sand to trap Niji's legs, then covering his entire body until he was trapped in a cocoon. He was careful not to squeeze, only restrict. His sensei noticed that and nodded lightly. He has seen all needed for now. Niji was plenty capable of using his taijutsu effectively, and did pretty good with ninjutsu. Though, the boy never once attempted genjutsu. He used a few weapons, but quit once he noticed it was only wasting them. The boy also deactivated his eyes once he realized it wasn't helping any to save chakra. He was resourceful. Good. On the other hand, Gar allowed Niji to tire himself out. He didn't move, instead of controlling his sand. He had been made aware of Gar's demon, though he wasn't sure if this was why the sand defended him, or if Gar was controlling him. If it was the demon, it was dangerous how little concern the 6-year-old had. as if he thought he was invisible. Once he had let Niji tire him out, he simply locked the Hyuga up. He didn't move to hurt him, though it looked like the gears in his head were turning. He noticed the look in Gar's eye, as though he was trying to fight off something inside of him. Something which was probably telling him to squeeze Niji to death or at least bruise him up. Sakatsu raised a hand, ending the fight just at the 14-minute mark. He didn't want any unnecessary harm coming to Niji physically or Gar emotionally. Good job, both of you. Both have things to work on, but that will be discussed later after everything else is worked out. Gar wins this time. Niji, let Hira heal up those scratch marks from the sand, then both you sit down. Sasuke and Hinata, you're next. The older students didn't miss the slight grimace Hinata gave as she stood up with Sasuke, and they both headed over. Niji sat beside Hira, thanking him quietly as the older boy healed him swiftly. Sasuke stood across from Hinata, both going into fighting positions before their sensei spoke. You may start. Sasuke turned on his Sharingan, while Hinata turned on her Byakugan. Sasuke made the first move, jumping back defensively. He lifted his arms, quickly creating the hand signals for the clone jutsu. One clone appeared, behind Hinata. Sasuke's clone moved to attack her from behind, though it couldn't really do any damage, being a simple illusion. It was enough to distract her at least, while Sasuke charged up to land a kick on her side. It hit, but her body jerked hard enough it startled Sasuke. He hadn't meant to hit her so hard, but luckily he didn't have to worry about it, as Hinata did a roll and kicked her foot out to hit Sasuke. He moved back as she stood up quickly, darting over to her. She pushed her fingers lightly over his side, the older boy doubling over in shock of the sudden pain in his side. He felt another pair of hands go towards his back, pressing between his shoulder blades. He hunched over further and narrowed his eyes with a cough. So she wanted to play it hard then. He did his own roll, his back still hunched as his muscles ached. Gentle fist. He positioned himself and moved his clone behind her, inhaling deeply. He put his hands up to his mouth before letting the chakra from his stomach rise to his throat. The young Uchiha quickly ran circles around her, not allowing her time to keep up. It was mostly her nerves that were her undoing, the girl unable to calm her breathing enough to focus. Small bursts of fire came from his throat, and an illusionary one from his clone, Hinata panicking and covering her face. Sasuke did his best to create a weak Jinjutsu, when he wasn't the best at due to his age. Most didn't learn Jinjutsu until they were at least 10, excluding the Uchiha clan of course. With eyes like theirs which could detail every point of an illusion, who wouldn't use it to their advantage? Hinata panicked, yipping and trying to wave the fire off as her eyes reactivated out of lack of chakra control. Niji sweat dropped, trying not to fasp him. Had his cousin forgotten her eyes let her see past most Jinjutsu? Sasuke relaxed, trying to straighten his back to ease the chakra flow which Hinata had blocked off. Their sensei had seen enough and raised an arm. You two are done. The job, both of you. Sasuke wins this time around. Here, heal those two up, please. Careful with Sasuke, it looks like the gentle fist technique. Niji, undo Hinata's work if you would. Sasuke stopped his Jinjutsu and Hinata relaxed. They went over to get healed by here, Niji easily moving to fix Sasuke's back. Amai crooked his head, lifting his hand as he spoke. Sensei, what is a gentle fist technique? He questioned curiously as he had never heard of the technique. Sakatsu smiled lightly at his curious students. One of the great techniques of the Hyuga clan. They touch their opponent's skin, pressing special points on their opponent's body to deactivate organs or chakra points. Anything as simple as a tap on the chest can end a person in the beat of a heart. Literally. A very impressive move. Just like that fire jutsu you used, Sasuke. Was it the great fireball jutsu? It looked a bit different than your clan's normal ones. Sasuke glanced up at him as his chakra points were restored. I just used less chakra so I didn't burn her too bad, he admitted. He knew he wasn't supposed to hold back much, but he'd rather not burn Hinata's skin off her bones. His teacher seemed to understand this as he nodded with a slight smile. Yes, you only needed to get a small fire burning to send her into a panic, so your Jinjutsu went easier. Smart move. Before turning his attention back to the others now that they were healed. Now, next is Kachona and Amai. You two go ahead and get started. Amai stood up with Kachona, standing against her until Sakatsu spoke. Begin. He allowed. Amai took a step back, quickly slicing his palm with his sharp nails. He created 3 clones to rotate and hide with as he summoned his creature. Just like that, a decently sized white tiger appeared. It obviously wasn't the king of its kind, but it also took a decent amount of skill. Kachona had created 2 clones of her own, each jumping off in a different direction. She moved fast, faster than the children had ever seen. Well, with the exception of Sasuke who had no shisui of the body flicker. After all, the older Uchiha had been like a second older brother to him. Sasuke had naturally begun to see quick movements faster after being allowed to sit in with Itachi, while he and the older boy trained. Now with his Sharingan, his eyes worked fast. Just barely fast enough to see what she was doing. She was running in circles, sending Senbin out to strike Amai. Amai did get struck multiple times, not fast enough to dodge. He lifted a hand and quickly made the hand signals for a water jutsu. He sent water out in all directions with extreme force, knocking Kachona back from her spot and destroying the clones. His tiger lunged for her but stopped as it stood over her. He had won, indisputably. Sakatsu nodded. Well done. Amai wins this time. Both of you come and let me heal your wounds. Hira and Tatsu, you go ahead. The two stood, making their way over to the mat. Once they got the signal to, they began. Hira darted forward, meeting Tatsu in the middle, as the younger moved to kick the escaped ninja. Tatsu moved down, easily avoiding it. He lowered, then rebounded up to press his fingers to the other's throat. Hira gagged a bit, moving to shield his throat reflexively. Tatsu used this to his advantage as he kicked the medic in the side. Hira growled as he was kicked, slamming against the wall. He laid there for a moment as Tatsu approached until he was in arm's reach. He dragged the older boy down, pinning him. Hira pushed against Tatsu's neck, using his medical knowledge to find one of his pressure points. As he was about to move his finger to paralyze him, the older ninja was gone and in his place a piece of chalk. Substitution jutsu. Tatsu put a kunai to his friend's neck from behind, silently winning. Hira sighed in frustration. He lost again. Sakatsu nodded at them. Good, good. Tatsu wins this time. Come and I'll heal you both up. Now for Tsuyoi and Shuri. Amai watched as the two stood up. He glanced at the younger classmates. I would be ready to move out of the way or shield your faces if I were you. These two can get pretty caught up in their fighting. He warned lightly. They nodded, shifting slightly and watching the two teens get into battle position before it was called to begin. Tsuyoi was the first to move, bouncing backward and sending ten or so shuriken out towards Shuri, who lifted his sword to block each of them easily. Tsuyoi darted forwards, meeting Shuri's sword with a kunai block. They were bounded, and Tsuyoi brought a bit of lighting to his hands. It was only a bit, as the lighting was one of the more difficult elements to create. He came from behind, however, pressing his hand to Shuri's back. The green-haired man hissed, turning on his heel and swinging his sword to slice against Tsuyoi. It hit right on his side, leaving a large slice across his ribs. The blue-haired boy grimaced, but only retreated back. Shuri used his momentary shock from being sliced to rush forward and strike him over the shoulder. He succeeded, but Tsuyoi grabbed his blade which lodged into his shoulder. Ignoring the blood on his hands which came from holding the blade's side of the edge, Tsuyoi pulled it away from his opponent. He used his other foot to kick out the green-haired man's knees, using his own sword against him. He put it up to the other's neck, earning him a win. Sakatsu sighed, having had to protect himself from a few stray kunai as had the others. You both did fine, but as I have repeatedly told you, stop being too messy with your shots when others are near. Tsuyoi wins again. Both of you come to get healed. Gaara and Sasuke are next. Go ahead. Sasuke stood to do as he said, Gaara following. The Redeed and Ravenet started as soon as they were motioned to. Sasuke's Sharingan was activated, looking for any weak points in his sand. He didn't see any, so he would have to make one. His eyes flashed, and he began his Jinjutsu while lifting his hands to make a shield of fire. Gaara's eyes flickered over to Hinata as she seemed to have gone into a coughing fit, blood coming from her mouth. Despite knowing it was a Jinjutsu, Gaara felt his nerves pick up. He couldn't move his eyes away until he forced them shut. He reached up to cover his eyes, knowing his sand would keep him safe, as Sasuke tried to strike him while he was doing so. All the spectators could see however was Sasuke staring at Gaara with his Sharingan, while the Redeed doubled over slightly in apparent mental pain. Sasuke finally moved, running up to slice his kunai to Gaara. Unfortunately, even without his focus, the sand completely protected him. So that answered Sakatsu's question at least. Sasuke continued trying to break through, doing anything from creating large fireballs that would have burned the class if not for his carefulness, to just trying to break through the sand with blunt force. Nothing worked, not speed nor skill. Finally, time ran out and Sasuke was forced to let go of his Jinjutsu. Gaara wins. Both of you did well. Since neither of you are hurt you can sit down. Amai and Tatsu, go ahead. The older students moved to fight as the pair of 6-year-olds sat down. Amai began similarly to the last one, the white-haired man summoning his same tiger to fight with him. Amai sent his tiger out on Tatsu, though the man evaded each and every time as the beast launched on him. They worked for a few moments like this until Tatsu created the hand signs for a water jutsu. The teen used this water to protect himself while throwing Senbon towards Amai from behind the wall of water. Amai dodged this, darting forwards and lodging the weapon into Tatsu's thigh. The older teen grimaced, falling down in pain as it had hit a tender spot. He dropped down, the tiger moving to set a paw on his head in a kill shot manner, though not delivering the blow of course. Sakatsu nodded at them. Good work. Both of you go get healed up by here. Then Amai, you'll be going against Gaara. He instructed. Both did as they were told, Gaara and Amai heading over to the mat as Amai finished healing. Gaara wasn't terribly nervous about his sand shield breaking, though he was weary. After all, this boy had won against two others already. Amai, on the other hand, was wary, not sure about the sand shield. As well as not sure he felt comfortable launching a full-grown tiger onto a 6-year-old boy. He shoved this down however as they began, keeping his guard up. He summoned his tiger back quickly, sending him against the boy if not for harm, then to test the sand. It was like he had a bubble, protecting him from ever being touched. Amai had to ask how he did it once this was all over. As expected, the sand protected Gar, but unexpectedly, the redeed finally moved. Amai frowned, so he could move during battle. He just hadn't needed to against the others. Gar lifted a hand, his sand forming his sand-binding coffin around first the tiger and then him. Once the tiger poofed away, Gar focused solely on him. His body was now encased in sand, and he found he couldn't move. Sakatsu raised a brow at him. So you're just going to sit or are you going to escape? He asked. Frustrated, Amai kept his annoyance in check as he spoke. My chakra isn't working. I can't move. He tried to wriggle out of his prison, and Gar did, in fact, loosen it a bit. He frowned, realizing if he kept moving he would kill himself with the force of the sand, gently squeezing him. After watching for a few moments as Gar let Amai struggle in a sand cocoon, Sakatsu sighed. That's enough. Gar, you win. You'll spar with Sayori now. Amai, do you have any wounds? His answer was given as the sand sunk off of him, and they could all see the yellow bruising beginning over his body. What crept the older students out, however, was when they looked at Gar, he didn't seem to regret the fact Amai practically wobbled over to their sensei to be healed. He even seemed a bit, dare they say, proud of himself. Though they would be right, he was proud. Just not for the reasons they thought. He has successfully used an attack without killing his opponent. For him, this was rare. He could see the looks of wariness from the older students, but paid them no mind as he noticed both Sasuke and Naruto's encouraging looks. Sayori joined him soon, and by now Gar had returned to his stoic self and hidden his thin prideful smile. He noticed how tall the other was. It wasn't just the fact he was older, he was tall as well. His shoulders were back in a formal and serious way, his eyes sharp. He was well muscled, but skinny as well. He was the picture of intimidating. On the other hand, to Sayori, it was odd. The little redeed in front of him was tiny, almost sickly looking. He was scrawny, had bags under his eyes, and he was short even for his age. He just had to remember the child was a threat, especially with how he had so easily beat Amai, who had ranked third in their class. As they were motioned to begin, Sayori moved to send a kunai at Gar as forcefully as he could. He didn't try to hide he was throwing it, instead of testing the strength in his barriers. Seeing it easily rebound, the blue-haired male reached up to kick the barrier. Still nothing. He prodded and poked at it, but never got past it. Finally, he tried something new. Instead of throwing weapons, he took his kunai and held it tight. He hit it against the sand, trying to break through. What kind of sand was this? He continued on until he noticed the extra sand start hovering a bit. Sand began violently coming at him, almost swooshing like a whip. He had to focus on evading, the boy sending snaps after him quickly. Sayori tried to summon lighting, but the sand wrapped around his wrists to pull them together. He struggled, but the more he struggled the more it hurt. He continued on, trying to pull his hands away. Finally, he heard his smaller opponent speak. If you keep struggling, you'll break your wrists. He quietly spoke. Sayori frowned and noticed the yellow swelling on his wrists. He decided to try Jinjutsu, much like the little Uchiha boy had done earlier to help him. Sayori manipulated the boy using Jinjutsu, making it appear as though blood was sleeping from the sand cuffs. He made a point of falling onto his knees and coughing up blood as he still wasn't let go. In the Jinjutsu he fell to the ground, screaming out in agony before seemingly dying. When he noticed Gar's sand didn't even lose, he glanced up. The boy hadn't even flinched. He let go of his Jinjutsu, returning them both to the physical world where they both stood silently watching each other. His hands now had begun to bleed, so he bowed his head lightly with a sigh of shame. He had lost. Sakatsu shook his head back and forth, speaking finally. Alright, a good job both of you. Gar wins. Sayori, go get healed up by here please. He commented. The team did as asked, noticing once the sand was off that his wrists were puffy and bruised. Gar sat down beside Sasuke on the floor, who nodded to him in greeting and congratulations. Sayori wasn't a sore loser, though it was odd to be defeated by someone besides Shuri. These new classmates of theirs were interesting, that was for sure. There were mixed feelings about the different students, all but one. One thing they all had in common was wariness for Gar. Not because of his strength or power, but because of his lack of remorse. It made them uncomfortable, though they tried not to jump to conclusions without formally meeting him. Their attention was snapped to the board as their sensei spoke. Alright, here are the new class rankings in order from highest to lowest. Gar, Sayori, Shuri, Amai, Sasuke, Tatsu, Kitrona, Niji, Hinata, here, then Naruto. Tomorrow we'll be going over the battles. I want you all to go home tonight and think about not only your fights, but your classmates' fights too. Think of how you could have done things differently or more effectively. I'll be sending you each home with a packet as well. For the fresh students it will be more As the class ended, the younger ones headed for the door where they presumed Conan would be picking them up. They all stood outside the school quietly waiting for her as the others filed out of the room. They watched as Katrona headed out the front gates with Tatsu, the other boys sticking around, however. They soon approached the younger children, specifically Gar. Sayori stood in front of the much smaller boy, and it was only then that the older students noticed how truly sickly the small child looked. How had he beaten the number 1 student? Gar didn't inch away as he noticed the other move to stand in front of him, instead of looking up at the blue-haired male. Niji did grow a bit nervous at the looming of the older teens however and frowned. He moved so he was between his older classmates and the younger children, a bit of protectiveness coming over him. Sasuke mimicked the movements of his slight rival, so both boys stood to guard in front of the others. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at them, while Niji asked, "What do you want?" defensively. He noticed the slight frown on Sayoi's face as the tall blue-haired male knelt down so he was on their level. "We mean no harm. I just came to tell you all that your power is impressive. Though, I notice Gar struggled to hit his killing urges." Eyes sweeping over to the young boy. "I don't care if you beat me, I don't care if you become stronger than anyone else in the village. But know this, if you decide to release the killing intent on Kachona or any of my friends for that matter, you will have all of us to deal with." Gar hid a grimace at that, nodding slightly. Sayoi continued, "I'm not threatening you specifically, that stands for all of you. None of you will bring harm to anyone else in the classroom." Shuri nudged him a bit and he continued, "I hold no grudges to you all, it is simply a fact. I hope we can all become friends over time despite the age gap. It's rare for this town to see new faces, let alone so many children." Sayoi's face softened into a smile once his point had been made, Niji and Sasuke remaining between them protectively. Shuri nodded in agreement, "Yes, we don't get many new villagers, let alone someone as young as you guys. How did you even get here, and where from? Did you guys' parents all decide to move away together or something?" he questioned with a smile. Naruto was the one to answer for them, smiling brightly up at the green-haired man. "We're all from Konoha, except Gar. He was visiting from Suno with his dad for a cage meeting. Then Conan and these other guys came up to Sasuke team and Gar. Sasuke didn't have parents so she was going to take him. But Gar got mad and tried to kill her for messing with him, and I had to stop Gar from killing her, because sometimes Shikaku gets a little pushy. So then the guy she was with said to just take us all so she did." He was babbling on and on by now, Sasuke and Niji gaining an embarrassed blush to their faces, while Gar frowned at the talkative boy with a sigh. Here he'd been hoping to keep Shikaku a secret. Hinata glanced over at Gar with worry, not wanting him to be upset. Naruto seemingly didn't notice a thing, of course. "So then we were leaving, but Hinata saw us and was worried we were being kidnapped, so she told Niji, and he came up to us and told them to put us down, because he had to listen to her, because she was the heir to the Hyuga clan, so that means she's in charge of him." Niji glared at Naruto as this point was made, noting he needed to teach the others some educate when it came to sharing others' personal information. So then Itachi, that Sasuke's older brother who had disappeared after doing something bad, told Konan they would bring Hinata and Iji along too, because the leader of their clan was mean. So then we all were brought here, and Konan said she was adopting us all. He smiled. Amai raised a brow, Konan-sen as in the woman who runs this entire village along with Pain-sama. He blinked. "You're saying she pretty much kidnapped you all to make you her children? Would your parents miss you?" Naruto shook his head. No. I and Sasuke don't have parents anymore. Plus Niji, Hinata, and Gar's guardians are all a bunch of jerks. He pouted at the idea before adding with a smile, "Konan is super nice, and so is everyone else we live with now." Pierre put a hand up to his chin in thought, leaning down as if to inspect them. "I think you're missing the main point, Amai." He rolled his eyes at his friend. "So let me get this straight. You were the heiress to the Hyuga clan." Motioning to Hinata, he nodded shyly. "You were the bodyguard to the heir, so presumably you're a prodigy to the clan." Glancing at Niji, who gave a firm nod. "You're most likely a prodigy of the Uchiha, since from what little I know about the Uchiha, they don't get their Sharingan until usually 13 or so," he noted, looking to Sasuke, who gave a light but slightly pained nod. "Then you're presumably the son of the Kazukiage and the vessel of a tailed beast." Gar nodded quietly at that. Pierre gave a thoughtful look before glancing at Naruto. "So were you just in the right place at the right time, or do you have some sort of odd little quirk? I'm not saying those reasons I said before are the only reasons you were adopted, but it would be likely." He analyzed. Amai frowned at him, knocking his friend over the head. "Here, that's rude." The medical ninja huffed a bit at the other, glaring lightly to him. "I was just asking. But seriously, kid, do you?" he asked with a tilt of his head. Naruto put a finger to his lip as if thinking before shrugging slightly. Kisum said, "I have the 9 tails in me, like Gar, but with more tails." He spoke easily, here raising a brow. So that knocked out any possibility of them taking Gar and Naruto for no reason. Seeing the warning look from Amai, however, he dropped it. Niji looked at the younger boy and scolded Naruto, "You can't just go around saying things like that. Gar can't protect himself, you can't. Keep that information to yourself. It'll get you killed." He glared. Sasuke nodded, mimicking the Hyuga's firm nod. Naruto only shrugged at them, unaware of the danger he put himself in by speaking of the 9 tails. Hira waved it off as he assured them, "Don't worry, none of us have anything against the tailed beasts. Well, Tatsu has some bad history with the 2 tails, but he's too timid to do anything, and he would never blame the host for its demon's doing. After all, it's not like it was you who destroyed the Leaf Village. It was a demon. It would be illogical to hate you." Sayoi added with a frown, "However, your friend is correct. You shouldn't let others know if you can't protect yourself. I wouldn't lie, that might be a while since your abilities are raw. Some people will take advantage of that. Suddenly the mood brightened, however, as Shuri got an idea. He smiled. I know, we all like training at Amai's house on Saturdays. Why don't you guys come to join us this weekend if Conan-sen says it's okay? He asked with excitement. Amai sighed at his friend Shuri. Don't invite strangers to other people's house. He scolded. Honestly, how impolite could his friends be? Shuri asked with a pout. So you're saying they can't come over to train with us? He raised a brow. He knew this wasn't what the other had meant, but it was fun to tease him nonetheless. Amai's face quickly turned to pink as he glared at the green-haired male. That isn't what I meant and you know it. Of course, it's fine with me, he assured them. Niji nodded a bit to the other, knowing they would need to ask Conan first of course. Amai blinked. By the way, the school's been out for 10 minutes or so now. We usually walk home, but you all can't know your way around town yet if you're so new. Is someone coming to pick you up? Sasuke scratched the back of his neck awkwardly, glancing at Niji. Was someone coming to pick them up? Were they supposed to walk back on their own? These fears subsided, however, as they heard Tadara's voice coming through the school gates. "Chen, brats. We're here to pick you up," he greeted, dango hanging out of his mouth. Toby rushed towards them, lifting Hinata up and cuddling her to his chest with the clue Toby doesn't think you're brats. Toby loves you, he assured them. Hinata let out a squeal as she was lifted, Niji reflexively moving to kick the older male in the shins. The masked man squealed, setting Hinata down in favor of gripping his poor leg. That Hyuga had some strong legs, damn. Toby whimpered. Toby was being nice to Hinata-chan. Niji is so mean. He pouted. The older children were taken aback. These were two of the men responsible for taking part in raising their classmates. They were so immature and rude. Deidara headed over and let out an annoyed sigh. Toby is also the reason we're late. Just had to get some dango on the way here, he muttered with a shake of his head. Naruto beamed at this, however, and looked up at the older blonde. Can we get some dango on the way back? Please. Seeing Deidara's glare, he pleaded more, giving him the one weapon he knew would always see him through his childhood. It was on that day Deidara met his greatest and only in his opinion weakness. Naruto's puppy dog eyes. The younger blonde swayed slightly on his feet as he asked please. Deidara was at a loss, and Toby watched his partner closely to see what he would do. After all, he needed to keep track of how close the other members got, if worst came to worst, and he had to extract the demons, killing them in the process. Unnecessary evil, he deemed. Deidara looked away roughly with an annoyed voice. You're all so bothersome. Fine. Chen, but don't get used to it, he growled. Sayoi nodded to his classmates and spoke on account of all of them. Well, then we'll see you tomorrow everyone. Good luck with the schoolwork. He bid them farewell, heading off with the others towards their houses. They nodded goodbye to the older ones, Naruto looking up at Deidara curiously. He thought for a moment, unsure of himself, before deciding it couldn't hurt to ask. He lifted his arms up and asked with a sly smile, up. Deidara sighed in annoyance, but was unable to refuse the little blonde's request. He lifted him up, setting him on his hip with a light Chen of irritation, as Naruto wrapped his arms around his neck, nuzzling up to him sweetly. Toby, of course, had to ruin the moment, pulling out his camera in excitement. Before Deidara could stop him, the masked man had snapped a photo. Ooh. Deidara, you look like a mother. Mommy Deidara. He cooed. The blonde in question sneered at him, temper rising as he growled, shut up Toby. Rip that up, now. I'll blow your ass up, he threatened, eliciting a light gasp from Sasuke and Naruto like. Naruto glared at him, and Sasuke crossed his arms. Deidara blinked as Naruto scolded him. You two be nice. Deidara, Nagato-sen said no more grown-up words, and you aren't a grown-up. So none of that, nah. He frowned at the 15-year-old who felt incredibly odd with the boy's command. Toby moved to tease Deidara about his behavior, but Sasuke interrupted him. You be nice to Deidara. Deidara is very handsome. Toby is being a bad boy. He scolded, remembering his mother explaining how fragile men's egos could be. Toby pouted a bit at this, but Deidara just sighed. Really, these children were either brave or stupid. Possibly both. He shook his head back and forth, and they headed off. Hinata and Niji held Toby's hand so they wouldn't be lost, while Sasuke held Deidara's, and Gaara stood tucked decently close to the blonde's side. Deidara was in a great mood, proud of himself for the first time in a while. As they headed into the dango shop, Deidara huffed and sat down. Toby sat across from them, the kids piling onto the picnic table while they waited on a waitress to come to them. A woman soon came over, notepad in hand. All of them ordered sweet dango with the exception of Deidara and Sasuke, who both settled for Mitarashi dango, preferring the salty taste to the overly sweet traditional kind. While they waited, Deidara noticed the younger blonde looked particularly less energetic than usual. He still smiled and made it seem like he was happy, but he also looked a bit sulkish in the process. Deidara leaned on his elbows ideally, huffing at the little boy. What are you so sulky about? He courted brow. Naruto shrugged and looked away, trying to dismiss it. Niji answered for him. He's probably sulking because he didn't get to fight today at school. Sensei said there wasn't much point since he doesn't have any ninja skills, he explained, earning a glare from Naruto. Madara quirked a brow. The kid had absolutely zero ninja skills. The older blonde scoffed. If that's why, then stop your sulking. You're going to the academy now, so you'll get better. Not to mention you're living with 9 amazingly skilled ninjas, plus Toby. I'm sure at least one of them will pick up training you when you're older. Naruto perked up a bit at this, and Madara noted Chen. The leader seems to be taking a shine to you. Maybe he'll even oversee your training if you're lucky enough. Though, that's a long way away if so. He commented before taking his dango from the waitress and plopping it in his mouth, similar to the others. Naruto's mood now seemed lifted, and Toby questioned, "You all were doing your placement test. What rankings did you all get?" He hummed out curiously. After all, the school system for their village was not a very easy one. Niji thought for a moment before he spoke, a bit shamed he and his cousin had come in last. They would need to pick up training together again so they didn't make fools of themselves. Gaara got first place. Sasuke got 5th. I got 8th. Hinata got 9th. Then Naruto got 11th. Madara nearly choked on his dango. You got first place. Glancing at the little 6-year-old who nodded slightly with a light smile. That's good. I'm sure you'll be a good ninja one day. He nodded in approval as they all finished. Toby left the money, humming as they all started towards the main house. As they entered, the kids quickly dispersed. Niji went to his bedroom, tugging Hinata along with him. Gaara made a beeline for Sasori, while Sasuke headed towards his room. Naruto wound up heading to the top floor. Niji closed the door behind him, frowning heavily at his younger cousin. He pulled a pack of homework out, Hinata mimicking him as he spoke. We should start our homework. We need to work hard to be better. Sitting down on his bed. His voice was firm, but his eyes were nowhere near as hard as they had grown used to being. His ego had taken a huge blow today, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. Usually, he was the best. The prodigy. So to head so low on a ranking was painful. He felt as though his ninja skills had been amateur in comparison to the others. He was working on mimicking the dotted lines for the letters inside. He supposed she was giving him a basic introduction packet to see how developed his skills were. Hinata noticed the slight shake to her cousin's shoulders, and the stressed look on his face. She reached over, hesitantly. She wrapped an arm around him in a hug, already having figured out what was wrong. After all, even if his cousin played the part of a humble protector, she knew the other had quite the pride in him. Niji Nai-san, don't worry. You went up against Gaara, and he's the one who hit the highest mark even above the elder classmen. You just had a hard match. You're still an amazing ninja. She smiled, her admiration clear. Niji seemed to calm down a bit at this, sighing. You're right. I'll just have to do better next time. He shook his head back and forth. We both will. We'll do the Hyuga clan name proud, he assured himself more than her. 00000000000. Sasori was working on a puppet when a little ball of red hair bounded towards him. He was a bit startled as he saw Gaara sit beside him, a proud smile on his face as he held onto his teddy bear, which he had reluctantly been convinced to leave at home for the school day. Sasori raised a brow as he continued to wire the puppet. Gaara nodded in excitement, announcing proudly to the other, I got first place in the whole class, and I didn't hurt anyone too bad. He smiled. Sasori smiled slightly at the other, though his mood dampened. If the child was this excited at not killing his opponent, he could only imagine how many had died at his hands. How much blood was on this boy's hands, despite his hidden sweet nature. The little Redeed had made a few rude comments to the other members for sent deadly glares, but he had restrained himself from killing any of them yet. The fact they were all S-class ninja probably helped too, so it would be harder to harm them than average citizens. Despite the rude comments and few glares he gave, Sasori could tell he was a sweet boy hiding behind harsh actions. Mainly, because Sasori had done the same thing when he was young and freshly left his grandmother. It was odd, but Sasori felt the need to protect the boy. Rationally, he knew he would become a ninja, and would shed a lot of blood in his life. However, he wanted this bloodshed to be with reason. He didn't want the sweet little boy to become a shell of himself as Sasori had become. He wanted to give Gaara what he himself could never have, a good childhood where he would be raised and even loved. He didn't want him to turn out as he had. That's great, Gaara, you did very well. I'm proud of you. He praised the boy, hiding raising a brow at the normally brutal and sadistic member from across the kitchen where he was watching the entire conversation. These kids really seemed to be getting attached to the Akatsuki, and it wasn't one-sided either. 000000000. Sasuke headed to his brother's room, opening the door. After all, at his old house, he went into whatever room he wanted without warning since he was alone. Unfortunately, this was not the case here. His eyes widened the size of baseballs as he saw his brother. The Ravenet was leaning on Kisum's chest, very much asleep. The shark ninja had his arms wrapped around him but was focused more on Sasuke at the moment. Both had their coats removed and laying on the other bed, Itachi wearing his normal undershirt and loose pants. Kisum wore a pair of shorts but was shirtless. Sasuke flustered as he made eye contact with Kisum, quickly looking down in embarrassment. Kisum raised a brow at the flustering little 6-year-old. Did a kid that young even understand there was something more than friendship based on their position? What are you looking at, kid? He prodded ideally, not bothering to remove his arm from Itachi's head, where he was lightly stroking his bangs. He did, however, use his water to press the door shut behind Sasuke. Sasuke jolted lightly as the door shut behind him, eyes still remaining on the floor, his hands folding behind him. And nothing, he muttered, hearing the waver in his voice as he spoke. He heard Kisum's long sigh but said nothing. Sasuke, come here. The bulky swordsman commanded. Sasuke slowly inched forward a bit, but came nowhere near close to where Kisum and Itachi lay. Closer. He took only a few inches forward before Kisum growled lightly. Don't make me get up and come to you. Hearing this, the boy quickened his pace, so he stood beside the bed, head still down. He wasn't sure what kind of person Kisum was yet, so he was wary, but he also knew he was definitely stronger than him, so there was no use in making him angry by trying to run off. Kisum asked Sasuke, do you know what I and Itachi were doing? Sasuke bit his lip, glancing down further, mentally curling into himself. I dunno, he muttered, not sure what they had been doing, but guessing by the way Kisum had been looking at Itachi, that it was not platonic love. He physically jolted back when Kisum put a hand on his head, ruffling his hair. The shark ninja chuckled deeply at him, smirking a bit. TCH, and Itachi said you're fierce. You're about as threatening as a kitten. He shook his head back and forth before returning to his original point. Sasuke, do you know why Itachi is laying on me? The small boy shook his head back and forth. It's because he's my partner, romantically, he explained. Sasuke asked curiously, slowly lifting his eyes to look over his brother. Romantically? Like mother and father? He questioned. Kisum looked at the small one firmly. Yes, like a married couple. We just aren't that far yet. We're called as boyfriends, but it's not something we want others to know. Being in a romantic relationship means making each other happy. It doesn't matter if it's 2 boys, 2 girls, or a boy and a girl. Alright. Sasuke thought for a moment before nodding a bit. That made sense to him. He asked suspiciously, you make my brother happy, right? Not wanting his brother to be unhappy as he had recently begun to forgive the older Uchiha. After all, if he was willing to kill their entire clan to protect him, he must love him. Kisum smirked at the boy's suspicions. Of course, I do my best. Now, you'll keep this a secret, right? Having others know would make both of us very unhappy. You wouldn't purposely make us upset, would you? He noted, needing to know no one would get confirmation of this. The other members would never let him live it down, and there would probably be a few dead villagers because of their loud mouths if they found out. Sasuke nodded seriously. He wanted his brother to be happy. 00000000000. Naruto headed into Nagato's room slowly, asking, can I come in, Nagato? Not wanting to upset the man who had agreed to be his friend. After all, he only really had Gaara and Sasuke as his friends before then, so he wasn't completely sure if friendship could be lost easily or not. He didn't want Nagato to hate him, he wanted to hear about his clan, and be able to stay close to the older Uzumaki. Nagato agreed easily from his chair, waving him over weakly. Of course. Come here, my boy. He smiled painfully. Konan was really the only one allowed up in this room in the Akatsuki, and she was usually busy in the village or sorting out other matters, so it was nice to have some real conversation with another. He couldn't exactly go downstairs with his body the way it was. Naruto smiled and bounded over to stand by his chair, grinning as he spoke. Guess what? We went to school today and had to introduce ourselves, then the other students did the same. They're all really big though, they're mostly teenagers. We all had to fight to see who was the top ranking, and Gaara got the top out of everyone. He's really strong. Sasuke got rank 5, then Neji got ranked 8, and Hinata got 9. I think Neji is upset he got such a low score. I got the lowest though because I got automatically placed as 11, since I don't have any ninja training, so it would have been pointless for me to try. Tadara said I'll get better. Oh. The others also invited us to go hang out at Imai's house this Saturday to train, so we're going to ask Konan. And Tadara took us to get dango too. It was really good. He babbled on and on, enjoying having someone to come home to talk about his date too. He also knew he would need help with that packet, so afterward he would make sure to ask Nagato about that. He seemed like a pretty smart guy to Naruto. 00000000000. Sasuke sat down at the desk in his bedroom, deciding to start the homework since Itachi was asleep at the moment. On Kisum. Sasuke would have to make sure to ask his brother about that. It didn't look very comfortable. Why not just use a pillow? He shook his head back and forth at this, deciding he would just have to ask later. For now, he needed to work on this homework. He had never been to school, but his brother had made sure he was prepared to before he left. Sasuke knew all the basic skills needed for school. He could read, write, count, and think logically. That's all you needed, right? He did the first few pages, which was simply writing. You traced some letters on a dotted line, then wrote it on the opposite blank page yourself. He did this easily enough, his handwriting surprisingly clear for a 6-year-old. The writing went on for an entire 3 pages. One for numbers, one for letters, and one for symbols. Once he finished that, the next section came up. It said to put a mark next to every word he could read out loud. He opened his mouth and began, kunai, jutsu, senbon, sword, string, people. Stopping to look at the next word, barely getting it out. Comfortable. Comfortable. February. He scowled, unable to say it. He supposed it would be easy enough to go ask for help from one of their caretakers or even one of his friends, but he couldn't do that. When Itachi was his age, he made perfect marks in all his base subjects plus ninja subjects. Sasuke knew he'd look like he was dumb if he had to get help. He also didn't want a bad mark, either though. He sighed heavily. Let's see. Naruto probably didn't know either, and even if he did, everyone in the house would hear him laughing if Sasuke needed help. Niji was older and would probably know, but he couldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing either. It would be humiliating. Hinata was younger plus had a stuttering problem, she couldn't help. Gaara maybe. Gaara wouldn't tell anyone or tease him for not knowing. He stood, inching downstairs until he spotted the raid with Sasori once again. He inched over, hiding half behind a wall and waving Gaara over towards him quietly. Gaara noticed him and stood, heading over to him. All the while, Sasori and hiding pretending not to notice. Sasuke leads Gaara up to his room and shut the door behind him. Sasuke put his back to the door as he spoke, glancing away. I need your help. But you can't tell anyone. Okay? Gaara looked curious but nodded, holding his bear at his side as he asked, what do you need? Not sure why it had to be a secret or what he wanted. Sasuke pointed towards the homework book as he spoke. How do you say February? Blushing a bit at his inability to say the word. Gaara looked over the book thoughtfully before shrugging at Sasuke. How was he supposed to know how to say it? Sasuke's face scrunched in aggravation. Stupid packet, why is it so hard? Gaara flipped through the pages. It has lots of things we shouldn't know yet. It looks like it's just to see where we're at. Why don't you ask your brother Niji? Looking devastated, Sasuke shook his head back and forth. I can't get help from them, they're smart. Seeing Gaara's look of not understanding why this was a problem, he added. They're really smart. So if I ask for help I'll look stupid. Itachi got perfect scores on all his work when he was in the academy, and he didn't get any help. I can't ask Niji because he'll think he's smarter than me. He spoke stubbornly. Gaara thought for a moment before offering shyly, I can ask Sasori how to say it, then tell you. Not sure why he was offering. A small part in him, he realized, didn't like seeing Sasuke so distressed. The boy had never been mean to him or fearful of him despite his tailed beast. So seeing him so scared of failure was odd. It brought back waves of displeasure for Gaara, but it was different than usual. Usually, he hated seeing others afraid, and so he silenced their fears with his sand. He still wanted the fear to be gone, but for some reason, he didn't want to kill Sasuke for being nervous. It was odd, and apparently, Shikaku picked up on his lack of hate for Sasuke's expression. He could hear his voice nagging in the back of his head, and gripped his head between his hands. He didn't want to kill Sasuke, even if he was only pretending to be his friend. He had been having such a great week so far, he didn't want his surprising accident-free streak to end. He just wanted to pretend that everything was alright, just for a little bit longer. Sasuke's voice brought him back to reality. Gaara, please stop. Looking up, Gaara realized his sand had a crushing grip on Sasuke's legs. He saw a bit of blood mixing in with his sand, and immediately forced his sand back. No. He didn't mean to hurt Sasuke, he hadn't. Now everyone in the hideout would hate him, and Sasuke would be afraid of him. The door slammed open, Sasuke having been dragged closer and out of the way. Konan rushed in, followed by Pain. Konan immediately saw what had happened, it being fairly obvious because of sand which was over different areas on the floor, and Sasuke's torn up legs. She headed over to Sasuke, gently lifting him into her arms. He was crying, his first instinct being to cling his arms around Konan's neck. He nuzzled his face into her shoulder, shameful of the tears in his eyes. Konan held onto him, sitting down on the bed with him to lightly stroke his back in comfort. Meanwhile, Pain headed over to Gaara. The boy stumbled back, assuming the older man was mad at him. His sand formed a protective dome, trying to hide him. Pain tried to coax him out. Come here, Gaara, I just want to talk to you. Seeing the boy made no move to come out, he assured him, we aren't mad at you. You didn't do it on purpose, did you? By now Sasori had headed upstairs to see what all the commotion was about. He stood in the doorway, watching the situation. Konan was holding Sasuke, poorly attempting to calm him down, while Pain tried to coax a nervous-looking Gaara out. He decided he should probably try to help Pain, since he wasn't any good at comforting either. He headed over, kneeling beside Pain. Gaara, you need to come out so we can talk. We aren't mad at you, but we need to know what happened. Slowly, much to Pain's surprise, Gaara lowered his sand. The little boy darted over to Sasori, hiding his small body in the puppet master's Akatsuki coat. Sasori had never actually touched the little boy due to his sand, but lowered his hand nearly on a reflex to rub his back as the boy spoke. I was talking to Sasuke, but then he gets nervous about something. I didn't mean to, I was just thinking about how it was weird I didn't want to hurt him. When people get scared Shikaku usually tells me to hurt them, but I didn't want to, he murmured shamefully into the older's coat. I looked up and his legs were all tore up. My sand was crushing him. He began to panic slightly. Sasori lifted him into his arms, shushing him lightly. It's alright, I'm sure Sasuke will forgive you. You just have to say sorry once his legs get healed up, alright? He assured the boy, who nodded a bit. One of Pain's other paths had gone to get Itachi, waking up the teen. He didn't even have time to be embarrassed as he heard Sasuke was hurt. He had stood up quickly, heading to his bedroom and fixing his hair on the way. He came in to see Sasuke leaning on Konan's chest tiredly, his face looking pained. Itachi headed over to them, sitting on the bed beside Sasuke. His little brother looked over at him, hiding his face a bit in Konan's coat, as Itachi moved to look at his leg. Besides the tearing on the outer skin, it looks like the bones have been shattered severally. He frowned, knowing for a fact none of them had good enough medical ninjutsu to heal this. He reached up, lightly running a hand through his little brother's hair. It's alright, Sasuke. We'll get you bandaged up for now. 00000000000. Gaara watched as Sasuke's leg was healed up, his eyes focused on the other boy. Things had calmed down by now, Konan and Itachi wrapping up Sasuke's leg, while Gaara stood against Sasori's side. It was odd, feeling guilty about hurting someone else. It was understandable though since Sasuke was one of the few people he had some sort of bond with. The little ravenet looked over at him as he was finally wrapped up. His legs both looked terrible, and Gaara had a feeling this wasn't the time to poke at his injuries. He felt Sasori's hand on his back and startled, the sand reflexively going to put pressure on Sasori's hand. The puppet allowed this, however, not moving it. The sand seemed to ease up on the hand at this, much to Sasori's surprise. It seemed the sand really did have a will of its own. Gaara moved a few steps closer, so he was in front of Sasuke, Itachi, and Konan watching him closely. Both noticed the look of immense guilt on him. Gaara inched forward, surprising the little ravenet as he threw his arms around him almost desperately. Looking worried, Gaara spoke, I'm so sorry Sasuke. I didn't mean to. He murmured, not wanting Sasuke to hate him. Usually, on the rare occasion someone survived his sand, they had new hate for him. He didn't want one of the few people who he had a decent bond with to dislike him. Sasuke, after he calmed down from the original shock, hugged him back gently. It's fine. He murmured. How could he be angry at him when he was so obviously guilty about it? Itachi let out a sigh as he looked at his little brother. It was good to see he was still innocent and at least mildly Konan smiled a bit at the two, putting a hand on Itachi's shoulder. She knew he cared dearly for his little brother, and as such, she imagined he had been worrying over Sasuke. She didn't know his reasons for killing his clan, but she assumed they either had hurt Sasuke or were being cruel to them both. He didn't seem like the type to simply snap without thinking things through, so she imagined he must have had a good reason. She doubted it would help to go to Itachi, since he had told them their reason was simply that he wanted to test the limits of his power. Toby had confirmed this. So she would have to go behind his back if she wanted to know. To Sasuke. But would he know? Or would she simply be opening up old wounds? She wasn't sure, and she didn't want to test it. She did have to wonder though. Itachi gently stroked Sasuke's hair once Gaara scrabbled back to Sasori, remembering how he used to love it as a child. Perhaps this would still apply. Sasuke leaned into his brother's affectionate petting, reminded of a time far less painful. Itachi smiled tiredly. Sasuke, since we don't have any good medics, we'll have to keep you home for a few days while we go out and look for one, alright? Someone will come to help you in no time, I promise. Seeing Sasuke's sad naughty side a bit. If you're good while you're home, I'll even help you with your training sometime. Alright. Immediately his eyes brightened at that, nodding much for excitedly. Sasori shook his head back and forth in amusement at Sasuke's quick mood change, patting Gaara's red hair. He felt the little one lean into his touch and sighed, lifting him. These poor kids all seemed equally touch-starved. He smiled a bit as Gaara relaxed against his shoulder, looking tired. It seemed now that he had the ability to sleep because of Pain's Rinnegan, the boy's body demanded it. Quietly heading out of the room, he brought Gaara to his room. When he tried to put the boy down however, he found him clinging to his neck. Sasori blinked. What's wrong, Gaara? There's nothing to be scared of. Gaara nuzzled up to Sasori as the older male sat on the bed. He'll come out and kill everyone if I sleep. I like you. I don't want you to die. He muttered. Sasori rubbed his back, and the Smola couldn't help but be lulled to sleep. It had been so long since anyone had touched him, let alone so gently. So now that he had lowered his guard, he couldn't help but want nothing else, but to embrace the warmth of another. Sasori muttered gently, don't worry. I'm strong and so is everyone else here. We won't die. We'll protect everyone, including you. He assured the boy who slowly drifted to sleep. 00000000000. Niji and Hinata had heard the commotion, but had stuck to their room. Hinata had been worried, but Niji had been quick to warn her off. They would only get in the way. Niji had trouble with a bit of it, but ignored this. It was to see how much they knew, not who had the best immediate scores. Hence why he refused to help Hinata. Hinata looked nervous. But Niji, what if they get mad at me for having such bad scores? I don't want them to dislike me, thinking back to the countless scoldings she received from her father when she couldn't handle a jutsu or didn't understand her study material. She looked down, eyes welling up. They'd been so nice to her. Konan and Itachi had been holding her, Kisame was nice to her Nai-san, Sasori was nice to Gar, and everyone else had yet to be unkind. She hadn't been belittled once since she got to this new village, but soon they would all see how worthless she was. She rubbed her nose gently to her sleeve, disappointed with herself. Niji's scoff pulled her from her thoughts. So what if they dislike you? You'll still have me and our friends. If any of them are mean to you, just tell me and I'll knock some sense into them. He decided proudly. Hinata blushed a bit, smiling as she heard this. She wiped away her tears, relaxing a bit. That was right. Her Nai-san would always protect her from all the people who made her upset. Because he was stronger than any of them. Well, besides maybe her dad, but he wasn't here right now. She continued with her work until dinner, happy at this newfound sense of relief. No one here could hurt her. Niji would protect her, she thought. Niji, on the other hand, felt fear welling up behind his brave scoffs. No way in hell he could take on even the weakest member. But he couldn't let them be mean to her either. He was her Nai-san, her lifelong protector. It was his duty to keep her safe from any threats. Thanks for watching.